Starmer, and then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a good evening to you. This is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock. And of course, at midnight, it is the phone-in, a whole hour just dedicated to you and your voices. And there really is only one conversation in town, isn't there, really, today? And that is Brexit. I want to know how you feel about what's happened today with this. Well, it isn't a deal. It's a deal to make a deal. People have been way jumping overhead over this, but if you actually read the documents, it says that we've just opened talks and we're going to be progressing on to the finalities of that deal. So nothing is written in stone or even in ink at this stage. So, but that aside, I want to know if you feel that this has been a betrayal, and if you think it is a betrayal, what has been betrayed? What is it about Brexit, what happened with Brexit, that you're angry that we could potentially now lose? What are the benefits of Brexit for you? What have those benefits been? Are they tangible, intangible? What have they been? I mean, you know, control of our borders. Right? That was the one thing everyone said, well, we're going to have control of our borders. Interesting point that since Brexit happened, just before Brexit, net migration was 333,000 people a year. 2 years later, it was 764,000 people from outside of the EU. Is that taking back control of our borders? Is that what you're worried we're going to lose now by allowing young people, a capped number of young European people, to come to the UK and vice versa? We can switch that around. Is that what's upsetting you? I'm genuinely asking, because I've been reading all day on the benefits of Brexit, and there's only one I've found, and that is the service industry has improved, has gone up, it's outperformed itself, the service industry, since Brexit. But those trade deals that we were meant to be getting, replacing the EU, have fallen woefully short of the deal we had with the EU as a trading partner. And look, we know the world has changed, right? So we know that America is being really sticky and really tricksy on a deal for us. We got the same tariff as the Taliban, right, for being great friends with them. Badenoch is saying, well, you know, that's it. We're not going to get a really good deal from America now. A free trade deal from America. Are you joking? There's no sign of it. No sign of it. And while we're looking for trading partners and improved relationships with trading partners, do you not think that it is a good thing that our government tries to refresh a trading deal with our biggest trading partner and our closest trading partner in this day and age? I'm genuinely curious as to what you think Starmer has betrayed you on. What have you lost today that you didn't have yesterday? Give me a call. I'm literally genuinely fascinated by this. 0344 499 1000 is the number that you need to get in touch, and you can message me as well. Put the word talk and then your message to 87222. Before that, we have the fabulous Vincent Moss in the studio to go through the newspapers for Tuesday. Ryan Harris is here from California talking us through some weird news. And Alex Three Lines Irons will also be here to chat through the sports news, especially from the weekend. Now, though, I wanted to get an update on some geopolitics. And this is because it is all kicking off around the world and we're not really looking. We're not really paying as much attention, perhaps, as we should, to what's going on with Israel and Gaza. Israel has ordered residents of Khan Yunis now to evacuate ahead of an unprecedented attack launch. They've also, begrudgingly, I have to say, begrudgingly, begun to allow some aid into Gaza, but a minimal amount, even from their own words, from their own lips. Just enough, a little bit, a drop in the ocean of what is actually required by the people of Gaza, who are either starving to death, dying from all sorts of injuries, and not being able to go to hospitals, and in fact going to hospitals and being blown up. So, that is something we've got to look at. And also, President Trump said this afternoon that his long call with the Russian President Vladimir Putin was excellent. And that Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations towards a ceasefire. The trouble is that we know he's a bit in awe of Putin. So what did he agree? Zelensky's already told him, don't agree anything on our behalf. You know, Ukraine has got to be at the table. We've got to be able to agree with this. Now, we know what Russia wants. Russia wants to get rid of Zelensky. They want a Russian government to take over Ukraine. They also want 5 areas of Ukraine. And they said then they'll start to talk about peace. So what was excellent about this call this afternoon? Well, hopefully with a few more details. Jamil Jafar, Executive Director at the National Security Institute at the George Mason University in Washington, D.C., joins me now. Jamil, let's kick off with that call between Putin and Trump. Any more details coming out?
Well, Petrie, what we do know for sure is that ultimately there was not an agreement to enter into a ceasefire coming off that call. We know the Ukrainians have been willing to, for a while, at least do a medium-term ceasefire. Putin has put on the table a couple of times a very short-term, a few days ceasefire. But there's been no real discussion of a long-term ceasefire. And if the goal of this call was to get him there, that doesn't appear to have succeeded. Now, he has gotten it back to the table, so that's a positive. But we'll see if that really results in anything. Remember, President Trump said that this war would be over not even the day after he joined office, but before he entered office. It's obviously we're now 5+ months in, and we still don't have a resolution to this conflict.
Well, J.D. Vance speaking for the president, which I thought was extraordinary, mind you, nothing surprises me anymore, was saying, well, look, if it doesn't do if they don't do what Trump wants, then we're out. This is Biden's war.
Well, look, that is a new and interesting position that Vice President Vance has taken, in the sense that he's saying, look, if nobody's willing to come to the table, then we're going to walk away. Now, that is a problem, obviously, for Ukraine, because ultimately Ukraine relies on U.S. support. That being said, President Trump has made other points, right? He's suggested, additional sanctions might go into place, and thus far he has continued to support Ukraine at a lesser level, obviously. But he has also continued to press Russia. And so even though the Trump administration came in sort of tipped to be substantially in Putin's favor, with Putin not really being willing to negotiate or not doing enough, President Trump has tried to increase moderately, to be fair, moderately, the pressure on Putin, while also still trying to get him back to the table. So we'll see how this plays out. It would be obviously catastrophic for Ukraine if the U.S. were to walk away completely and would only benefit Russia, which, we'll see if the Trump administration does that, but they haven't done that for the last 5 months.
But, Jamil, I mean, look, the first rule of negotiating, right, you don't show either side your hand, right, if you are the negotiator. J.D. Vance saying that ahead of talks, ahead of that phone call, you can bet your life that Putin saw it, and is now, all he's got to do is play this out. All he's got to do is kick the can down the road until the US gets bored with it, and then he's won. I mean, it's so basic. It is unbelievable. You wouldn't have to explain that to a 3-year-old.
No, you're exactly right, Petrie. If that's the play here, obviously it's giving away all your leverage. If that's where the United States is.
Exactly. It's unbelievable.
100%. The challenging thing for Vladimir Putin is Trump has suggested that before, but then he's actually changed course multiple times. He's actually gotten more aggressive against Russia. Again, only in a moderate way, not nearly where President Biden was, not nearly where some of the conservative Republicans want him to be on Ukraine. But he hasn't sort of given, the president could have easily walked away from Ukraine 100%, on day one, day two, and said, look, Vladimir, you deal with it, right? You want to take what you take, do it. People had him tipped to do that, and he didn't actually do that. So, I do think the practice on the ground is a little different. I do think you're right that giving away all your negotiating leverage is a mistake, particularly for, as Trump likes to refer to himself, the greatest negotiator in history. He sort of did the same thing with TikTok. If you look at what happened there, where he said, look, I want America to buy TikTok. I want to get this deal done. But then his best piece of leverage, which was banning TikTok and blaming Congress for it because they're the ones who instituted the ban, he's held off on doing that. He's given repeated 90-day extensions without any sort of end in sight, which don't even comport with the law. And of course, that puts him in a very difficult position, because why would China negotiate at all if they know he's going to keep giving them extensions?
But yeah, I mean, you say he's been tougher on Russia, but only in rhetoric. I mean, he had levers he could pull, and he could have pulled them today. He could have got tough with Putin. He could have said, look, it's not enough that you send some of the lowest people in your administration to Turkey to insult Zelensky. That is not good enough. You were responsible for this war. You need to do it. Otherwise, there are sanctions. Instead, Trump comes out on Truth Social. He'd clearly been talking about trade deals with Russia. He wasn't for those 2 hours. He wasn't talking about peace deals. He was talking about trade. And it's very clear from his Truth Social. Oh, there's going to be great trade after this. We're going to trade with Russia. Russia's going to make a fortune. It's going to be great for everybody. Does he not know what that looks like? Or does he not care?
Look, there's no doubt that President Trump has a view that he can solve a lot of these problems with economics, that he can get better deals than anybody else, that he can win the sort of world game through the U.S.'s economic power. He tried that with tariffs around the globe. It didn't work. He had to pull back. He tried that with China. It worked a little bit, but he really didn't get a whole lot for the tariffs that were in place briefly. So, look, that approach is one he's trying. It's not working as effectively as I think he'd hoped it would work. Now he's trying it with Putin. He's trying the carrot version, which is you'll make a ton of money if you end this war and we can do trade with you. But unclear if it's going to work. It hasn't worked to date. And let's be honest, Vladimir Putin is fundamentally not a trustworthy person. He does not have America's interests at heart or at all. He only has Russia's interests at stake, which as the leader of Russia is where he should be. But President Trump thinks he can deal with him and get a good deal done. This is the challenge. He thinks he can do it with China. He thinks he can do it with Iran on a nuclear deal. And the reality is these, competitors are not just competitors, they're adversaries. And the sooner we start treating them like that, instead of like friends we can work with, I think probably the better off we are. We've seen this mistake, by the way, with Russia over and over again. President Obama made this mistake when he said to Putin, give me some more time after the election. President Bush, my old boss, made the mistake when he said, I looked into his soul and I saw somebody I can work with. President Trump has made this mistake before with Vladimir Putin. He's about to make it again. We'll see what happens.
I mean, a lot of people are suggesting it's difficult to read the outcome of the Putin-Trump call as anything other than a failure on Donald Trump's part. How can this be spun by Donald Trump as anything other than a US president who has failed in negotiation, diplomacy, and in the stewardship of this conflict? I mean, they are tough words.
Spin. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the spin from the White House is and will be, if we get to a deal now, right, if we get to a ceasefire, Ukraine and Russia get to a ceasefire in the next week or two, President Trump will almost certainly claim credit for that, saying, look, it was my initiative. I got Vladimir Putin back on board after he backed off multiple times. If they're at a ceasefire, then he can start talking about, end of conflict status negotiations. And if he can get there, then he can talk about the sanctions coming off and doing the trade deals that he's pitched in these calls. And so it's the way to spin it as a win. But of course, if Vladimir Putin continues to conduct attacks as he did when they were so close on the ceasefire negotiations earlier, attacking Kyiv brutally, it's not going to work. And Trump, showed frustration with Putin back a few weeks ago. He now thinks he's back in a good place. Remember, this is a president who thought he could do a nuclear deal with North Korea. That didn't work out. He thinks he's got a good trade deal with China. We'll see if that plays out. And he thinks he can push the rest of the world around, which hasn't worked yet thus far. It may work at times. We'll see. But, with Vladimir Putin, this is a guy who is fundamentally not trustworthy. President after president has made the mistake of thinking, I can work with Vladimir Putin. I can do deals with him. President Obama did substantively nothing about Vladimir Putin's first invasion of Ukraine, and look at where we ended up, a second invasion. And so, look, American presidents have failed time and time again when it comes to Russia. The only language they understand, and the only language Putin understands, is strength and power. And we'll see if he thinks Trump has that. It doesn't look like it right now because he's not giving in and trying to get a deal done.
I mean, we know what Putin wants. And I mentioned it just before I came to you. They want to get rid of the root causes of the conflict, right? Which we know is the removal of a democratically elected president, the installation of a Russian proxy government, as well as the incorporation of 5 Ukrainian regions into Russia. Now, what is in it for Ukraine to say yes to any single one of those things? I mean, there's never going to be a safe negotiation if that's what's on the table.
No, that's exactly right. And as a result, it's hard to see Ukraine making a deal. At the same time, Ukraine doesn't have a lot of options right now. If the Europeans could back this fight standing alone, they would. It's clear they cannot. And so without the U.S. supporting Ukraine, it's going to be very hard for them to gain any ground, much less get to a better negotiating position than they're in today. So unfortunately for Ukraine, they're going to have to make some very costly concessions, which again, with a brutal dictator and somebody who invades other countries like Vladimir Putin, all it's going to do is empower him.
Yeah.
He'll take these 5 provinces or whatever he gets, 3 provinces, 2, whatever he gets, and he won't be done with that. His ultimate goal is complete control of Ukraine, whether through a proxy or directly. I think you're exactly right. But then on top of it, his goal is to expand the Russian Empire back beyond Ukraine to other parts of the former Soviet Union. Remember, he's a former KGB, FSB type officer who sort of hankers for the old USSR.
Yeah.
And the more we give him, we saw it in 2014 with Obama, you let him take Crimea, he's not done there. He's going to keep going. And I predict this will not be the end of it. We'll be back having this conversation in a couple of years from now. Petrie, whatever the deal gets done is, if it gives him anything, he'll want more later. He'll just use this time to rebuild his armed forces, get stronger, and come in tougher.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just before we finish up, I do want to talk about Israel. Trump has gone very quiet on relationships or relations with Benjamin Netanyahu. Has he got bored of that?
Well, Petrie, I'm not sure it's bored, but you did notice that President Trump was all over the Middle East in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
He was in Qatar. He was in UAE. He was in Saudi. He met with the Syrian president, right, or the former Al Qaeda leader, I should know.
Yeah.
And he did not go to Israel. Very interesting decision by President Trump to not go to Israel. Now, obviously, President Trump has historically been a strong supporter of Israel. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government view President Trump as a strong supporter. But him not going to Israel is a signal, and it may suggest that in trying to do these deals with these other Arab governments, that there may be an effort here to try to bring the Gaza conflict to a close. The problem, of course, is in doing all that, President Trump did talk about Gaza and said, well, the U.S. is going to take it over, and we're going to solve for it. We're going to put people in good housing. Now, again, in the past when he said that, he meant remove those people from Gaza, put them in housing elsewhere, presumably in Jordan and Egypt, neither of which wants to take them. And of course, the idea that you're moving 2 million people out of their homes, it's unprecedented and almost certainly illegal under international law. Right, exactly. And so, we'll see how this thing plays out. But he did say that. And, look, the Israelis are getting a lot of funding and support and military support from the United States. They've now begun a new offensive there into Gaza. If the U.S. doesn't stand in the way of that, the offensive will continue. And so, even without speaking, President Trump is supporting, I think, the Israeli government in this effort. And ultimately, that's what they're looking for.
But is he waiting? I mean, look, we know that the Abraham Accord, the Middle East wanted a 2-state solution. What's happening in Israel at the moment, or in Gaza and Israel at the moment, and with the Trump, whatever the Costa del Trump or whatever he wants to call it, that is not a 2-state solution. So Donald Trump now realizing that, he can get a Trump Tower in Saudi Arabia, he can get one in Syria, he can get a golf course in Qatar, all of the, those things. Is that going to sway him away from Israel?
Well, who knows where the needle moves, but I guess what I will say about it is that President Trump has long been a supporter of Israel. They do have a right to bring the fight to Hamas and ultimately take Hamas out. The question is at what cost and for them politically, and in the long term, what's the solution, right? What does a long-term end state for Israel and the Palestinians look like? Because at the end of the day, Israel doesn't want and can't survive a one-state solution either, because having the Palestinians in their state, it makes the Jewish character of that state impossible to keep. At the same time, Israel's a democracy, and having a group of people who don't have a democratic right in that country won't survive either. And so for Israel, too, a solution other than a one-state solution is something they need to identify. The question is right now, how do you get there? And there's no clear path to that going forward as of right now. I was just in Israel at the end of December. It was the bleakest I've seen it, both on the Israeli side and the Palestinians. Nobody sees a path forward right now. And that's what makes this situation really difficult, Petrie.
But Trump has emboldened Netanyahu to continue basically leveling Gaza, and using Hamas and pushing people further away. And they're now talking about creating a safe zone in Gaza that will be Israeli controlled. That sounds to me like they've already started the process of clearing out that whole region.
Well, Petrie, look, I don't think the Israelis think they can clear out the region or really establish a long-term presence in Gaza outside of at the perimeter on the borders, right? You remember, the Israelis have been in Gaza before. They've occupied it before. They had settlements. They made the voluntary decision to pull out, remove their settlers at some significant cost to the Israeli government itself, physically using its own military to remove its own people in order to get out of Gaza. I don't think they have any desire to go back in there other than to create a sort of, what you might call a demilitarized zone along the border to prevent attacks like what we saw. Again, could be proven wrong, but I doubt they want to reoccupy any part of Gaza. Then the question becomes, once you have that sort of border zone, what happens next? That's the million-dollar question that nobody has an answer to.
Yeah.
And as far as leveling Gaza goes, look, if Israel wanted to really level Gaza tomorrow and kill millions, they could. They're not doing that, right? The reality is that while the civilian death toll is horrific and way more than anybody would want, right? They are trying to prosecute a war against Hamas. And the truth is, every civilian that dies in that conflict, every woman or child that dies in that conflict, does not benefit Israel. It harms them, makes it hard for them to fight the war, because the international community, goes against them. And if you look at it, the real beneficiary of civilians dying in Gaza is Hamas. And so you wonder why they're putting civilians in harm's way. It's because unlike a typical government, Hamas doesn't want to save their own civilians. They actually want to put them at risk, taking the view that in the long term, that's going to benefit them. And that's the real problem with a group like Hamas.
Jamil, it's fascinating as ever to talk to you. Thank you so much for giving me the time today. I know you were busy. Jamil Jafar there, Executive Director at the National Security Institute at George Mason University in Washington, D.C.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie with you. And coming up at midnight, of course, is the phone-in. And I want to know that all the headlines today and all the TV shows and radio betrayal by Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer's betrayed us. He's betrayed us. He's let us down. He's sold us back to the EU. He's given up fishing rights. In fact, the fishing rights that it's just been extended. It was supposed to come to an end. This the same agreement was supposed to come to an end in 2026, and then it was going to be looked at every year. Once a year there was going to be a renegotiation, which nobody thought was a good idea. So they've extended it by 12 years. Now, a lot of people might think, well, that's too much. That is way too long. But it is the same deal. It's just been extended for those 12 years. And everyone's going, oh, the fishing, he sold us down the river, he's done all, literally, and all you know, all of that. And I'm just interested to know what you believe Keir Starmer has done today. What do you think has been done to you that has stolen something from what we got from Brexit? And while we're at it, you know, decade down the road, what are the gains that you believe we've got from Brexit? Because we were promised, weren't we, control of our borders, or net migration, more than, I mean, it's tripled since Brexit. Then there were the trade deals that we were going to get. And you're not happy about the India trade deal. And, you know, the American trade deal is pants. And we've got one with Australia, but it's a tiny fraction of what we lost with trading in Europe. Europe is collectively bigger than the US by nearly 100 million people. It's our closest neighbour. And there are reports, independent reports, that the cost of Brexit has been between 100 and 140 billion pounds a year to this country. That's £2,000 per person a year worse off. And in London, for some reason, that's £3,400 a year worse off. I don't know why. But according to independent sources, that's what we've lost. But what have we gained? We've gained the right to make deals with other countries. We're still not losing that. We've just agreed to a better trade deal with the EU, I think. I mean, we haven't actually agreed anything yet. But anyway, look, I want to know what you think we've lost today. What is the betrayal? Where is the betrayal? And what have you lost? Give me a call. I'm genuinely fascinated to find out. 0344 499 1000. Give me a call.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And joining me now is Alex, Three Lines Irons, TalkSport presenter and producer. Hello! How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, my hair's looking a bit funny. Right.
That's okay, so is mine.
Yeah, sorry.
Where is it?
It's because I mess with it in the break and then I come back and it's all like this. Anyway.
You look lovely.
Thank you. So do you. Now, there's a new name on the FA Cup. I've held the FA Cup once.
Ah, have you?
Yeah,
I had a picture with it, I think
I've got a
late
picture of
last
it
year.
somewhere, but I don't know. I can't tell
It
you
got
where it is.
brought into the TalkSport studios and I made sure that they didn't leave without me having a picture with it. So I held them down at one point. No, I didn't go that far. Yeah, there is a brand new name on the FA Cup, and that is Crystal Palace. It's the first time they've ever won the FA Cup in their history, which dates back to the late or the early 1900s. I was there at Wembley sitting with Palace fans, actually, in the Palace end as they beat Manchester City 1-0. Your favourite Pep Guardiola isn't going to be winning any silverware this season, although he states that because they've won the Community Shield, that counts as silverware, but no one ever claims it as silverware because it doesn't really count. But it was a fantastic day for Palace fans who were in fantastic voice from the beginning right to the very end of the game, and of course a lot of fans all their fans have never seen Palace lift a major trophy in their lifetimes. There was a video going around that I saw earlier of a 90-year-old woman who was at Wembley and was in absolute tears that she was alive to see her club win the FA Cup in her lifetime. So, you know, a great day for Palace fans. As someone who, I think I mentioned to you before, I would have liked City to win it because it meant that Crystal Palace weren't going to stop my club from getting European football. I don't really think there's going to be a problem now, so I'm more than happy for Crystal Palace to win the FA Cup. And,
was it a shock,
Fulham
though?
can try again next. It was a bit of a shock. Manchester City were favourites, and of course they go to, Wembley's their second home. I think they've been, in the last 12 years, they've been 30 times, where, of course, Crystal Palace haven't been since they were promoted from the Championship. I think in 2012, they went up from the Championship as playoff winners, and they've not been back since. I don't know, they were at Wembley when they lost to Manchester United in 2016. Apart from that, they've not been back at Wembley, so big occasion for Manchester for Crystal Palace, who, like I said, fans were brilliant, made a lot of noise, singing all the way through the game. They had a lot of
good for them.
a lot of flags, tifos. They unveiled a tifo before the game had started.
What's a tifo?
A tifo is like a big banner.
Oh.
I'm sure you've seen them for like behind the goal at football matches before a game. A big banner will go up and all the fans will hold it up, or they'll hold up a lot of cards or whatever. This one was of three Palace fans dating all the way back from 2011 in the League Cup quarter-finals when TalkSport's very own Darren Ambrose scored a 35-yard wonder goal. There was it panned to a video of a father holding his two sons cheering in celebration. Since then, the father, a man called Mark, he lost his life to cancer in 2017. That image became a symbol of lost loved ones for Crystal Palace fans, and that tifo went up before the game. And the two sons, Nathan and Dominic, didn't know it was going to happen. So
that's
they
really
were
sweet, isn't
in
it?
absolute disbelief just to see that, and then to see their team win at Wembley for the first time in their lifetimes was a very, very special moment for a lot of football fans, and also for all those Crystal Palace fans in attendance and watching at home as well.
Yeah, it's good to talk about the nice side of football occasionally.
Yeah, exactly.
Chelsea women have secured a domestic treble.
Yeah, so you had the men's FA Cup final on Saturday, and then on Sunday, the women's FA Cup, where Chelsea completed a domestic treble after they beat Manchester United in the women's FA Cup final at Wembley. 2 goals from Sandy Baltimore and Caterina Maccaro. They got in on the action to make sure that Chelsea beat Manchester United 3-0. And Sonia Pompastor, who has come in replacing the former manager who went on to manage in the USA, I don't think anybody really expected this at all. It's been a complete surprise for Sonia Bompastor to come in and essentially walk all over English football in regards to the women's game, a bit like Arne Slot has with Liverpool in the Premier League. Not only was it a great achievement on the pitch, but off it as well. The Reddit founder Alexis Onanian, he was at Wembley with his wife Serena Williams after announcing a £20 million investment into Chelsea Women, and he's going to come in as like one of their major owners. So he's saying they're going to be the queens of football, and they're going to be £1 billion outfit. So it's an interesting time for women's football, and really Chelsea Women in particular, who've won 6 WSL trophies in a row. So I don't think that's going to end anytime soon, and it wouldn't surprise me if they won another 6 or more in the next 6-7 years or so. Oh,
good for them, and that injection of cash will certainly be helpful.
Yeah,
a couple of goodbyes now. Everton have said goodbye to Goodison Park.
Well, the men's side have.
Yeah.
So Everton
they're not demolishing it then? They're not getting rid of it?
They were going to demolish it originally, and now they've saved the stadium, or the Grand Old Lady, as Everton Park is called. It's been open since 1886, which makes it one of the oldest professional football grounds in England. They played their last home game against Southampton on Sunday, and it was an emotional affair for Everton fans. They had there were fans outside the stadium 4 hours beforehand holding blue flares and getting the party started. They had a whole range of former players in attendance, Wayne Rooney being there, of course. You had the likes of Tim Cahill and a lot of the older players as well from the 80s, 70s and 60s who are still with us today in attendance. And they had a bit of a party as well. Fans were allowed to bring alcohol into the stands for the first time since the 80s, not during the game but afterwards, when they had the ceremony and the celebrations at the end. It was a nice thing to see, but Everton aren't leaving Goodison Park completely. They are going to be moving to their brand new ground, which is Bramley Moor Dock, which has been renamed the Hill Dickinson Stadium, which isn't a great name and has had quite a lot of memes made of it, as you can tell with that name.
Can you imagine?
Announcement. But the women's team will be moving in there as of next season. So the men's team moving on to a brand new stadium, and the women's team will get to play in the old men's Premier League stadium, which I think is quite nice. It keeps the stadium in the club. It means it's not going to get knocked down. It's a piece of history, and it's a brand new era for it as well. And new fans can go in there. I've never been to Goodison Park, and now that I know it's going to be open for a bit longer, I'm going to go and experience it for myself.
Well, there you go. Gary Lineker. He's finally had to leave the BBC.
Yeah, so it's something that it's been rumbling a little while, this story. But Gary Lineker has confirmed that he will leave the BBC after presenting his final episode of Match of the Day this coming Sunday, when the Premier League season comes to its rather slow conclusion. The 64-year-old had been expected to continue fronting coverage of the Men's FA Cup and World Cup, but was criticised last week after sharing a social media post about Zionism that included an illustration of a rat, historically used as an anti-Semitic insult. He said earlier today that he did not see the image and would never consciously repost anything anti-Semitic. So
I did actually...
I've not seen it, so
no, I did believe his apology. He looked absolutely
I do as well. I feel like it was one of those things where...
it was stupid because he shouldn't be getting involved in politics when you've got people who pay your wages in the form of the licence fee. You can't afford to be upsetting any one group of those people that pay your very large fee. But I do believe that Lineker is a humanitarian, and I do believe that he just posted. Well, not just posted.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Disgusting, but I believed his apology. But again, I agree that it was time for him to go.
I agree with you I believe that he's a genuine man, and he would never set out to post anything that and mean any offence to anyone in particular. But it's not the first time he's had controversies. He's been stewing for a little while, and it felt like it's the BBC Culture and Media editor Katie Razzle has said that this was essentially the last straw for BBC bosses who considered his position untenable. So it felt like even if he hadn't said this and he'd said something else further down the line, they were waiting for a reason for him to be pushed, then for him to go on his own accord. And it's a shame that he's gone like this, because he's a fantastic broadcaster. He's been on the TV for for my whole lifetime, essentially. He's been
25, 30 years, isn't it?
Yeah, so he's been doing Match of the Day since, the mid-late 90s. He's been a fixture of football in this country for that period of time, and longer, of course, playing for England in the 80s. And of course,
I'm
he's
telling
been selling
you,
crisps as well. So he sold crisps for longer than he played football, which is also very
That's
strange.
interesting. I'm guaranteeing that he'll have had phone calls from everybody before the BBC, even Tim Davie even put out a statement. He will be doing the World Cup with somebody, I tell you.
I reckon he will still be around. He was doing stuff with BT Sport as well of his time with the BBC, and I think that it will be silly for the managers in the company that we work in to maybe not knock on his door and just say, World Cup's coming up, would you like to join us?
Would you do it for £3.50?
I would say, would you do it for a bag of Walker's crisps?
Yeah.
That seems up to our remit,
I don't think our pockets are deep enough, but it wouldn't surprise me if our boss, and we know who we're talking about, would have at least given it a go. And good on him for trying. Alex, thank you. Good to see you.
My
good
pleasure.
to talk to you. Thank you so much. That is Alex, 3 Lions Irons, their talk sport presenter and a producer. Quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk and I'm Petrie, and it is time now to head off to California and join Ryan Harris, our journalist and broadcaster there. Ryan, it seems odd to me. Googly eyes. Do you know, I gave one of the little googly eyes to one of my team whose dog has just got one eye, and so she was able to yeah, and he looked brilliant. What's the dog called? Bobby. Herbie. So Herbie had one of the googly eyes as well.
Oh gosh!
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he was very happy with it. I have to be honest with you, Ryan. It seems weird to ask for weird news from America because it's all I seem to be reading at the moment. But I love this story. Wildlife rescuers wear bear suits to care for a cub.
Yeah, that's right, Petrie. It's no secret that wildlife rescuers will go to great lengths sometimes to care for the animals that come to them. And, you know, really a lot of the effort is to make sure that the animals don't get accustomed to having people around so that they can be returned to the wild and live as they are supposed to. So the folks at the San Diego Humane Society's Ramona shelter, as you can see, took the extra step there and have taken to wearing bear costumes to feed the cub, a 2-month-old black bear cub that is the youngest patient they've ever had. It is awfully cute, but you don't want it to get used to being around people. Now, this cub was found wandering the Los Padres National Forest, and the people who found it were unable to locate its mother. So they took it in and began feeding it because it was clearly hungry and underweight, but they don't want it to think that people are its mother or to get used to being around people.
So very sensible, because people are horrible. Yeah.
Well, and it won't do well when it goes back out into the wild. It needs to be able to figure out how to live on its own. And so they put on the bear costumes, and they're playing with the bear, the stuffed bear there,
to get him used to siblings,
to get him used to being around other bears. Now, the people at the facility say the cub is stable and doing well. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife says if they take in another cub, they might actually try to put the two together to kind of keep them wild before releasing them. But for now, they will keep up their costume charade and care for the cub until he is well enough to be returned to the forest.
Oh, I mean, that is dedication. I mean, it's not the first time we've seen this. I think in China, with pandas, they wear a panda costume when they're trying to get them to breed. I think that's because they notoriously don't want to breed pandas. But I know that I've seen other carers with animal carers wearing bear costumes. But that is so cute and very sensible. Because, like I said, human beings are revolting. We don't want them to get used to human beings. We're disgusting. Now, this goes from one extreme to the other. Human beings wearing bear suits to being bare naked. This is being absolutely not wearing anything.
That's right. So for runners who like to let it all hang out when they don their shoes and head to the starting line of their local 5K race, have the perfect event in South Carolina. It's called the Buck Creek Streak. I have to say that 3 times fast.
You have to say very carefully.
Yes, the Buck Creek Streak at the Carolina Foothills Resort in Spartanburg County. Now, Petrie, you probably have started to figure out Carolina Foothills Resort is a nudist colony, and the Buck Creek Streak is a clothing optional race. Now, it's a small race with just over 160 people signed up so far, but they say that breaks a previous record for the event by leaps and bounds. Race is open to anyone, not just members of the resort, but newcomers have to go through a background check to make sure they don't have any unusual motives there before being allowed to enter the resort grounds. This reminds me of a couple of things. So my first news job was in Palm Springs, which is famous for the Naked Bridge. There's a nudist colony right there in downtown, and they bought property on either side of the street. So the solution was so that they could cross between the facilities to build the Naked Bridge, which is a bridge you can't see anything when people are crossing it, but it goes right over the street. And, every time you drive under it, there's naked people in there. But the other thing it reminds me of is the Beta Breakers race in San Francisco. It's been run for decades. It was actually just held yesterday, Sunday, because it's not only known for people dressing in odd costumes, but people who feel the urge to run through chilly San Francisco at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning in the buff. In fact, the year I ran the Beta Breakers, there was a naked guy who decided he wanted to pace me for a while until I finally just had to tell him, hey, take it someplace else. But I think it's a safe bet that the people running around this particular race won't just be looking down at the ground for hazards in the road. I mean,
the hazards are on the body. I mean, if you're a woman running without a bra on, you might get black eyes. I mean, it's not comfortable. It's not, it's not going to be comfortable to run without a bra on. And as for other dangly bits, they'll be all over the shop. It's not sensible. It's not sensible to run with no clothes on. That's all I'm going to say on that topic. Let's move on to monkeys. Kidnapping monkeys. Now, I didn't realise this is the monkeys that are doing the kidnapping.
Oh, they absolutely are.
I thought it was people kidnapping monkeys, but no, this is monkeys kidnapping monkeys.
I know there's some of that going on as well. In fact, the guy just got busted in Thailand trying to sell a couple of baby orangutan, which are endangered. But no, this is the monkeys doing it on their own. And look, we know that teenagers can sometimes get into a little bit of trouble when they're bored. Mine did when she was a teenager, and it appears the same is true for a breed of monkey on an island in Panama. On Jicaron Island, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, it's part of Panama's Coiba National Park. There's a new fad among capuchin monkeys. Now, you'll know the capuchin monkey because it's the type of monkey you used to see in the old days with the organ grinder. So they call them organ grinder monkeys. There seems to be this new fad of kidnapping the babies of their howler monkey neighbors. Scientists first noticed the trend captured on wildlife cameras when they spotted a juvenile capuchin monkey they named Joker because he has a scar on his mouth that resembles the Batman character, and Joker was carrying a baby howler monkey on their back. So they thought, well, this is a little strange, and they started going through the other footage, and they began to notice the same thing among other juvenile capuchin monkeys, but only among those on the island, not on the mainland. Now, these monkey experts say they will often learn behaviors from each other. And the example they use is the use of stone tools to crack open, I should say, coconuts and shellfish, among other things. And they say because there are no predators and food is plentiful, they often get bored, which is why they believe the monkeys have taken to kidnapping the howler monkey babies. Now, after reviewing the camera footage, they also found the howler monkey mothers and babies calling to each other, which is kind of sad if you think about it.
Yeah.
And they say in one case, the howler monkeys tried to get the baby back and then were scared off by the capuchin monkeys. So they even suggest the capuchin went to great distances to kidnap the babies because there just aren't that many howler monkeys living close by them. They are concerned because they say the capuchin monkeys aren't actually caring for the babies, but they do say that they eventually also get bored with carrying them around and eventually leave them alone. So hopefully the babies are okay and reunited with their monkey families after their kidnapping ordeals.
Very strange behaviour, isn't it? Across, I mean, I know it's the same species, but across, it's not even their own kind. That's really, really weird. Let's have a look now at a man trying to escape the police using an underwater scooter. Are we getting ready for Alcatraz opening again? Is this?
We're prepping for that. In fact, I was just telling a good friend of mine, because we've been out there a couple of times, but it's been many, many years, to say, hey, we got to go take one more tour.
Yeah.
Before they reopen it, and we can't go anymore because it'll be an operating prison again. And in fact, sometime when we're off air, remind me to tell you the story of when I was a kid and my friend and I tried to stay overnight on Alcatraz. That's your tease for now. I mean, I won't show you. Yeah, you'll love it.
Yeah.
You'll love it. So anyway, so in this case, I keep thinking about the late Kenny Rogers. He had the perfect song. It wasn't one of his biggest hits, but it goes, "You can't outrun the long arm of the law." And that's really true with Matthew Piercy of Shasta County, right here in California, just a few hours north of me, who didn't seem to learn the Bernie Madoff lesson that Ponzi schemes don't work. Mr. Piercy took more than $35 million from investors, which he used for personal and other expenses, and only paid back just shy of about $9 million. Federal prosecutors also say Piercy tried to convince his victims not to respond to grand jury subpoenas, and he even at one point sent coded messages from jail to a couple of cohorts telling them to empty out a storage locker on his behalf. Would love to know what was in that storage locker. Well, police eventually caught up to Mr. Piercy, who led them on a car chase, eventually jumping out into the very cold Lake Shasta waters and into a sea scooter, which I've come to learn is a vehicle that pulls people underwater at about 4 miles per hour. So not exactly a high-speed chase. Now, here's my favorite part. Police say he was out of sight for about 20 minutes, but they say they were able to follow the bubbles coming up in the water, Now, of course, he got right. So he's just glug, glug, glug along, and there he is.
Not the smartest tool in the box, then.
He really is not, as the late Robin Williams should say, he's probably 2 tacos short of a combination plate. But after, being forced to resurface, because there's only so much air with these things, they arrested him. Mr. Piercy pleaded guilty to wire fraud, mail fraud, witness tampering, of course, and money laundering. And he is facing a maximum of 20 years in prison for each count when he is sentenced in September. Yeah, I mean, the judge might not give him the full 20 years for each count, but there's going to be multiple counts of wire fraud and mail fraud. So, I mean, he could be looking at 60, 70, 100 years in prison.
And I presume they've kept him in jail for now. They've not let him go on remand.
Oh yeah, no, they did actually when they picked him up, they did say he's a flight risk, and he has actually pleaded guilty to these charges. So it's a done deal. It's no longer that he's accused; he has admitted his guilt.
Well, not so much a flight risk as a very slow underwater scuba risk. I mean, honestly,
yes.
Some people, they couldn't light a 5-watt bulb, could they? Listen, it's great to see you. Wonderful to see you. Thank you. Ryan Harris there, journalist and broadcaster in California. Right, stay where you are. Vincent Moss is here to go through the papers for tomorrow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. It's good to have your company, and it is also wonderful to say that I'm in the company of Vincent Moss, former political editor. Feels like I haven't seen you for ages.
No, it's been a while. Hi, Petrie.
It's been a while. Good to see you. Listen, before we get into the papers, this whole betrayal over Brexit, people are feeling completely and totally betrayed by what happened today. And it's not even a deal yet. My understanding is that they're talking about it and they've opened the door to making a deal. But it was sold as a deal by both Ursula von der Leyen and Keir Starmer. What do you make of this, the idea that he has betrayed the Brexit vote?
Well, it's a hard one because nobody wants Brexit relitigated, as Keir Starmer says. Those who voted against wanted to stay that way, and those who voted for Brexit also wanted to stay. You know, the votes happened. I think the problem is with the current situation is a lot of the so-called deal is just headlines at the moment. When you look into the small print, a lot of things aren't really changing or happening. So we're told that the e-gates queues at passport control when you go on holiday might disappear. Turns out they're not disappearing at all. Countries will have to allow them, change the rules so that that can happen. It's not going to happen automatically, and you still have to queue up this summer. So a lot of it is headlines, and I think a lot of people will just be thinking, didn't we decide this nine years ago in 2016? Why are we going over this ground again? So I think there'll be a general public air of sort of bemusement, really, because they thought Brexit was dealt with and done with, but it's not.
It's not. But also, we are in a situation where we are demanding that the government finds better deals with trade deals with countries, and we've signed a few, but nowhere near what we lost when we pulled out of the EU in terms of trade deals with the EU, our biggest neighbour, biggest trading bloc. Is Keir Starmer just trying to look? It's a very uncertain world now, with America behaving the way it is, and with Trump and his tariffs on, tariffs off. Nobody knows what's happening at the moment. Isn't it just sensible to sort of ratify deals with our biggest trading partner?
Very much so. I mean, they're only 21 miles away across the channel, 450 million
Yeah, 100 million
consumers.
more than America.
Exactly, huge markets. And I think one of the things that has come out of it that does sound like a good thing is we did have an issue with some of our food going over there, particularly things like seafoods and oysters and things like that, where the stock was literally rotting in the docks and the harbours because they couldn't complete people couldn't complete the paperwork and go through all the hoops they had to jump through to export it there. And they were just thinking, this is too hard, we're not going to do it. So if this deal, or this reset deal, as Keir Starmer likes to call it, has addressed some of those issues, and to be fair, the people who are trading say that it has, and it will help them, particularly with the food stuffs involved, if it's got rid of some of that red tape so our marketeers can get their products to markets in the EU, that is a good thing. And they certainly seem to be saying that. So that does seem like a positive and does reopen for us, without reopening the single market and without reopening us rejoining the European Union. If it is making it easier for UK companies to trade successfully with Europe, that has to be a good thing. And the government needs growth. We all want growth. That's the way that we'll all get better off. And that sounds like to me a positive. But even then, Keir Starmer's saying that will benefit us by about £9 billion eventually. Sounds like a lot, but compared to the 4% of GDP that we lost when we came out of the European Union, it's a tiny amount. It amounts to about 0.2, 0.3% of GDP. So not even a tenth, really, of what we lost when we came out of the EU.
It's interesting to me that I've got a lot of messages here, people saying totally betrayed, this is about disregarding the lawful will of the electorate to leave the EU. Starmer has no respect for democracy. Well, I mean, first of all, the Brexit vote was ruled unlawful. It was. And we've all forgotten that. And that if it hadn't been an advisory vote, it would have been cancelled, right? It was ruled that it was unlawful. Nevertheless, the balance was 52 to 48. But I find it really interesting that although we can't really point to the advantages of Brexit, people still cling on to it as a symbol of something. And democracy is an ever-moving feast, and there was still now, if the vote were to happen today, it would be overwhelmingly in favour of remaining in the EU. But people are angry about it, totally betrayed. Keir Starmer has already signed the fishing deal. Well, the fishing deal was already in place. This has been extended. It's the same fishing deal, but it has been extended for 12 years as opposed to doing it every year, which comes to the end in 26. But I still find it fascinating that although the financial harm Brexit has done to us, and it has been proven now beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're all poorer for it, that people still cling on to it as something that's very important to them.
They do, because for many people who voted for Brexit, it was about sovereignty, it was about border control, and they feel that those things haven't happened. The pro-Brexit argument, they haven't happened, that's right. The pro-Brexit argument is Brexit would have worked, but this isn't the Brexit that we wanted. And had the proper Brexit been executed properly, and it wasn't by the Conservatives, then everything would have changed. We would have had migration under control, the borders were and of course we won't know this because you can't run a controlled experiment that shows you how things might have turned out. People are unhappy with the Brexit they've got, so the pro-Brexit people are unhappy, and the people who never voted Brexit in the first place, well, they're still clearly unhappy. But I think you're right about the element in terms of what it gives us is we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, there's an awful lot of things that are just sort of headlined things at the moment, and we'll have
we
to
don't
see
know
quite how it will play out. But nobody's really happy with it. I think it's a bit unfair for some of the papers, though, to suggest, particularly on fishing, which is the big totemic issue, because that was an existing deal. This is not Keir Starmer giving away fishing rights. It's the same deal. It's coming to an end, as you rightly say, in 2026. It's now extended for another 12 years. Now, if you never liked the deal in the first place, which many people didn't, fishermen didn't, under the Conservatives, it's not great because it's extended. But it's not a change, it's just a continuation. But it's not a great headline, is it? Same fishing deal continues as it was before. It's been presented as though it's a new thing.
Yeah, and there's nothing to say that every year for 12 years the deal wouldn't have been the same anyway. It's just that they've done it in a block as opposed to doing it year by year by year.
Exactly, and there are mitigations put in place that may help the fishing industry. It's always struggled, it's struggling again now. And it's a popular thing to say, but fishing represents 0.04% of GDP. It's really important, but it's a tiny element.
It's a tiny,
of the UK economy.
Yeah, I had 0.03, but 0.03 to 4%. It's less than Harrods makes in a year or something.
Yeah, it's a really small amount.
It's a very small amount.
And when you compare it to some of the other things out there, I mean, obviously our car industry and things like that, it's tiny really. And if we can open up trade in a way that gets some of the bigger parts of the economy able to hit that 450 million consumers in Europe, it'd be of much more benefit. You know, fishing industry is really important.
And also this whole idea of controlling our borders, I know exactly what people voted for when they voted for that. They voted to stop the boats. That's what they're talking about. And in fact, since 2015, which is the year before the vote, net migration was 333,000 people. 2 years after the vote, it was 794,000 people. So you've got... net migration has... And since then, it's gone up even further to 970,000 people, I think. So it's nearly tripled. Net migration has nearly tripled. So that was a dud.
That's right. The irony is
it got worse.
Yes, exactly.
Much worse.
We left in 2016, and what happened after that is migration, mainly legal migration, hit, as you say, 900,000 and went through the roof. So the whole point of Brexit was to gain control of the borders. Didn't work. The Conservatives failed to stop the small boats. Labour is similarly failing to stop the small boats. We haven't even got to the peak summer season.
But that's what the Brexit vote was for. I don't think anybody minded a bunch of Spanish, Italian and French people coming over to work in our pubs. I think that they wanted to stop that sort of migration, and of course that hasn't stopped. That's got worse and worse and worse.
That's right, and the stopping of those young people in particular coming to work in hospitality and theatres and bars and care industry and things like that, it's really hit our economy because people can't find the staff to drive the economy forward because relied a lot on that young overseas labour that came in for an exciting chance to see a bit of the world. Same with our people going abroad, and it's not happening. Yeah,
as I did when I went to Australia. I went and worked in a bar and a chip shop. Very glamorous. It's just interesting to me that people are saying, look, this is an outrage, because I get if you feel you've been let down, but we haven't gone back into the EU. We haven't re-signed any deals. The money that we're still part of the EU in certain bodies that we've had to stay attached to, like Horizon and certain investigation stuff and all of that. We pay into that still because that benefits this country, but we left most of those organisations, some of which we shouldn't have left, and we've had to rejoin because it's about science and it's about scientists and it's about all of those things. But I don't understand why this is a betrayal, and people are so upset and betrayed by it. But I think he's just trying to improve the deal. I don't know.
That's right. I mean, the defence of the government is that he's trying to fix some of the things that weren't there in the original deal. So fishing, as we've discussed, is a continuation of what was already happening in the past, and other things that surely everybody finds annoying, like queuing at the E-gates. Now, some airports, that can be 2 hours to go through E-gates at EU airports when you used to breeze through in the past. Now, if the government can fix that so you can breeze through the E-gates at passport control, surely that's a good thing. Now, I know you're a dog owner, I am too. Let's see, there's the mention of pet passports. Now, it's a huge pain at the moment to take your dog on holiday with you if you go to Europe. Now, if we can get pet passports back, I think that's a concrete thing that people would like. I mean, not quite there, but at least the talks are underway and they're starting to move in the right direction, because once these sort of headlines have been agreed, that gives the officials in the various administrations the sort of under the ministerial instructions to go away, work on pet passports, get these things done. So they're not in place yet, but at least the government is trying to remove some of these obstacles. An area I'm really keen on. It's really hard for bands and artists and classical musicians to tour the EU.
Yeah.
So many complex visa arrangements.
Erasmus.
It's things like carnets about you can only drive a lorry if it's on a European tour. It can only stop twice before it has to go back to the UK. There's rules about instruments that you can move around the EU. All sorts of complex rules. Now those could and should be swept away.
They should be.
So there's a little mention in the memorandum of understanding about that. So there's lots of little things that, depending on which sector you work in, affect you. We talked about food. If those can be cleared away to make life easier for people and people see concrete examples of changes, I think that will help them. But it's not helpful to be talking about, if people are talking about betrayal, let's be specific. I think the thing that worries them most potentially is the young people's exchange mobility scheme, because they don't know where that's going to end up. And we don't, to be fair. The government has said it will be capped in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
And again, this is a scheme we already operate with 12 countries, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. Now, obviously, there's a lot more young people in Europe, but so long as it's capped, so long as it's time limited, so long as it's managed by visas, and particularly if they're coming here to fill gaps in our own economy, has to be a good thing. And also, we've both done it. The joy of going and discovering a new European country or capital and working abroad as a young person is fantastic. Something denied to our young people at the moment. So yet another thing that they're losing out on, that they're being denied. Now, again, is that something that we want to stop? I wouldn't have thought so.
It almost feels like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and with Nigel Farage getting really upset about it and saying, when I'm in power, I'll just U-turn on everything that Labour does. That's punching yourself in the face in a lot of these instances. That's just, why are we so good at punching ourselves in the face?
I thought so, especially as the demographics and some of the voting support for reform at the moment is very young people.
Yeah.
Now, while they might believe in an awful lot of reform policies, the policies that they have, I would have thought that they're pretty keen on being able to travel around Europe and take the odd job in Milan or Amsterdam or on a Greek island. And if Nigel Farage is saying he's not going to let that happen, I would have thought that might be damaging some of his votes.
Yeah, and Badenoch, of course, said, I'll think about U-turning on them. I mean, look, I suppose we have to, like we said, there's no deal actually been done, so we need to sort of wait and see what actually comes out after this memorandum of understanding. But there's a lot of good stuff there that I don't think messes with anybody's rights.
No, exactly. I think if people want to, as I'm sure they will be over the next few days, go through it. The stuff you say you don't like, fine, but be specific. But let's bear in mind the government's, Labour's struggling in the polls. It's put this together because it thinks and hopes it will be popular. Moving through e-gates, popular. Pet passports, popular. Food not rotting in the docks and trading with 450 million people, you thought quite popular. It's not put stuff in there that it thinks is unpopular. So I think if people look at it and they've got things they don't like, then fine, raise that as a point. But let's not use fishing as an example, because, as we've both been saying, this is not new. This is just a continuation of something that's already happening.
This was already fixed. This was already sorted and was going to be negotiated year on year after 2026. Nothing to say that it wouldn't have been negotiated exactly the same for 12 years. And what this does is give the fishing industry some certainty. So this is nothing new.
Yes.
Right, let's have a quick look at the Wall Street Journal. Always amazed by how much news they can cram onto the front page of an American paper. Right, let's have a look. GM pushes EVs but now aims to pull the plug on California rule. General Motors went all in on electric cars and now it's racing to reverse the nation's most aggressive electric vehicle mandate. We need your help, GM said in an email, and recently said to thousands of white-collar employees, emission standards that are not aligned with market realities pose a serious threat to our business. I suppose there's a lot of people say, and certainly in this country we're saying, look, this race for net zero is going to cost us way more and is moving too quickly. But General Motors has many problems in the US at the moment, and not least tariffs.
Well, exactly, and they're worried about the drop-off in EV sales. That story in the Wall Street Journal is talking about EV sales falling 5% in April, so that is a big problem. And of course, all these companies have changed a lot of their production processes to meet what they thought was going to be a big demand for EVs, and the consumer demand seems to be cooling a little bit. It's still pretty buoyant in the UK, but with all the pressure on about relaxing or getting rid of net zero targets, that may change. And people are still worried about range of electric cars, aren't they? Even though there has been a big surge in the number of charging points that you see around. I remember driving into motorway service stations, and you would see queues of cars for those EV points. You don't see that so much anymore, I don't think.
No, and also I like to be in and out of those places as quickly as possible. Yes. And the thought of having to sit there for 40 minutes while my car charges, forget it. Not having that. Israel expands ground in campaign in Gaza. Trump's gone very quiet on this. He was out in the Middle East and didn't drop in to Israel. However, he's not come out against what they're doing either.
No, and we have seen just a small handful of aid trucks going in. There's sort of clamour from the UK and France and Canada and everywhere else to sort of deal with what's an appalling humanitarian crisis is just sort of growing louder and louder, but it doesn't seem to be changing Israel's planned course of action to sort of take over huge parts of Gaza. And it is really, really worrying because the pictures that you see on the TV screens and the newspapers are just terrible, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, Netanyahu as well saying, all these people support us, but they said they'd never support the idea of starving people to death. So what we're going to do is send a few trucks in.
Yeah, and I think
trucks.
It's 5 trucks, and I think what do they need? At least 200.
600, yeah, there's 600 trucks they're talking. That normally would go across in a few days.
Yeah.
It's nothing, and I just like, we're just going to send enough. I don't understand what language he's using and why he thinks that's acceptable. We're going to control it, and we're not going to send in. We're just enough.
Exactly, and wherever you stand on the politics and the reasons behind the war,
I don't stand on the politics on this.
The starvation of thousands and thousands of children
and the treatment of those people is
it?
disgusting. Russia steps up Ukraine attacks before Trump call. He's just laughing at Donald Trump, isn't he?
Well, he sort of got him on a bit of a string, hasn't he, potentially? I mean, Trump has said he's had this very successful 2.5 hour call with Putin, and it's gone well, and they've had a nice chat.
They talk trade. That's
exactly.
what they talk.
Well, yes, exactly. But that also seems to be rewarding bad behaviour because you invade a country, and then the president of the free world, the leader of the free world, effectively comes and says, "I'll offer you some kind of trade deal." So it is worrying, and there's no sense, although Trump's very upbeat about the outcome of that conversation with Putin, there's no guarantee that Putin will do anything positive. It just feels as though he's playing for time a bit and
he's waiting
enjoys
for
the
America.
attention.
Yeah, he's waiting for America to say, right, that's it, we've had enough, which it could be tomorrow, it could be the day after, and then he's basically hands down won, and he knows that because JD Vance helpfully told him that just before the phone call. But I mean, also the Truth Social post just banging on about trade.
I mean,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
they can make a thought. We could all be rich. We could. It's like, hang on a minute. There are people being bombed to death in Ukraine, and you're talking about a trade deal with a man who's doing it. I don't have the words. Honestly, I really don't understand it anymore. Right, Vincent, shall we take a break and come back and have a look at the UK papers next?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you and with me, Vincent Moss, going through the papers. Let's have a look at the Times, Vincent, for Tuesday. Trump dangles trade carrot. That's what we were just talking about there. He's talking his language, isn't he? He thinks it's all about the deal, although so far he hasn't really been great at deals, it doesn't seem. So he was saying, obviously he's been saying to Putin, look, finish the war and we'll open up all this trade. It's going to be big and beautiful.
Well, exactly. End the war, he says on his Truth Social network. But it's very hard to see how that happens because both sides are not going to retreat, which is what it will require. I mean, Zelensky's not going to pull his troops out of parts of the Ukraine where the Russians are, and the Russians don't look as though they're going to pull back to Moscow either. Putin
wants a Russian proxy government running Ukraine. I mean, that is absolutely no. And Zelensky gone. He's a democratically elected president. I mean, he knows that's a no, right?
Exactly, and I think the 5 states he wants as well. It's very, very hard to see how you move towards the same with Gaza, really. How you move towards a solution. I mean, the first step is always a ceasefire. So I think getting to that point would be a start, and then so long as the talk's gone, at least people aren't dying in the horrendous numbers they are and getting wounded in the way they are. But let's see. Trump's also, in the way he's done this, he seems to be running a bit of a narrative which is I'm the only person who can solve this, he's only going to talk to me, which in itself is a little bit of a, well, you know, I did my best, I did it, but no, I'm the only one who can solve it, so if I can't solve it, then it will carry on. So it seems as though he's almost sort of preparing the ground with his sort of Republican allies back at home, that he's gone in there, he's done what he can, but it might not work.
But he's getting bored. Yeah,
and he's moving on to, well, keeps going, but he's also very good at, even when he fails, he talks it up as a great success, and I suspect that is what we'll see somehow emerging.
Oh no, he'll just blame Biden.
Yeah, well, how much longer can he do that for?
Probably forever. I mean,
for another 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, the downgrading of the credit of the US, that's Biden's fault. I mean, it's been AAA rated since I think America began, and now they've been downgraded to AA plus. But it's not AAA, and we all know that AAA is the thing you want in batteries, and it's the thing you want in credit ratings. Well, that has been downgraded, and that I don't know how he's going to sell that to the American people, because that means their debt is going to cost more, mortgages are going to cost more, everything is going to cost more, and it's not good for inflation.
Exactly, and he's already putting pressure on the Fed to try and cut interest rates. We've seen a couple of cuts over here, and they haven't happened over there, and it's costing an awful lot for him to service US debt, and it's a big problem.
It's just gone up again. And his big, beautiful bill, tax, hasn't gone through either, and that was actually stymied by Republicans. 5 Republicans stood up against that. Anyway, we'll wait and see if this does lead to a ceasefire. It would be great. King Charles there at the Chelsea Flower Show. King gets to grips with a new rose named in his honour. The King's Rose, it's called. It's very pretty. I love the Chelsea Flower Show, but it is for poshos, isn't it, really?
I think so. I've been once, and it's struck me as very crowded, but it's a good event. If you're into gardening, into flowers and things like that, it's definitely worth going. I think it does get very, very busy. I think the key to go is I think this is presumably the preview day when there's only the royals and the VIPs there and the journalists, and I think that'd be a good day to visit.
That is a good day to visit, but not everybody can get on that day. It does get very, very crowded, and there's lots of old ladies walking around with scissors. Did you know that?
No, what do they do?
Taking cuttings.
Is that
very
legal?
Naughty. No. You see them, they're right on it. They're
quite clever.
They're little thugs they are. I've seen them. And it's the same at Kew Gardens. Little old ladies with little scissors.
Imagine if they were searched on the way out. That's two-tier policing. There should be somebody there to stop them.
With the grannies, the granny thieves at the Chelsea Flower Show.
It's a very good idea, though.
It's a good idea. You can't blame them for it. They're sucking it in their little handbags. I don't think the Queen did that, but you know. No trans applicants on all women shortlists. Labour will ban transgender women from all women shortlists after the Supreme Court's ruling on biological sex. It sort of makes sense, doesn't it?
I think so. I mean, it says that there will be a vote on Tuesday about this, and that Labour will sort of fall into line with the recent Supreme Court ruling. So that I think makes sense. I mean, that somebody may challenge it, but I mean, for one instance, I mean, I guess there would have to be. It would only be a problem if there was a trans applicant actually on seeking to join an all-women shortlist.
Yes,
so chances of that are probably statistically quite low.
Statistically very low, actually. But I mean, and also, I mean, I have a problem with trans women in sport if they've gone through puberty, because they physically have had the benefit of testosterone, right? I'm not sure that I worry so much about all women shortlists having trans women on there. I'm not sure that I'm bothered about that.
No, and also
I don't, like you said, statistically very low chance that there would be, and it doesn't mean they'll.
We're also at the point where all
unless it's specifically a women's issue.
Yeah, so I think Labour are now at the point, potentially, and some of the other parties too, where there are enough women, all the women shortlists were brought in because it was a hugely male-dominated environment in the House of Commons. Now, I don't think it's quite 50-50 in the Labour ranks, I could be wrong, but it's pretty close, or it's certainly heading that way. Yeah. So the need, certainly in Labour ranks, for all-women shortlists is sort of diminishing. I'm probably stay for a few years, but it's diminishing because you're pretty much at 50-50, which is a reflection of all parties should look like the nation they're trying to govern in terms of sort of makeup. And I would imagine Labour, if it's not 50-50, is pretty much heading towards that fairly soon anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I mean, this is an argument that will go on for a very long time. But you know, I just wish that we were the other side of it, in terms of the fact that choosing, you know, becoming trans must be the most difficult decision, the most difficult journey ever, and not one that you would choose to do just for a laugh. And I would like to be, and the same with gay issues, wasn't it? For a long time, it was like, oh, can't have gays in toilets because they'll be, you know, all of that. And now we've realised that actually these predators are predators no matter what their gender recognition is.
Yeah.
I just wish we were the other side of it. Should we take a break? Vincent and I will be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here, and with me is Vincent Moss, former political editor. Let's have a look at the Daily Telegraph. Kiss goodbye to Brexit. Starmer gives up fishing rights. Again, that's factually not right, is it? I mean, the fishing right, they've already decided and agreed, and this has just extended it instead of doing it year for year. Anyway, Putin will get a big trade deal if he ends the war, Trump suggests, so carrot, not stick. And what else have we got? 800 grand own goal. Lineker leaves without a payoff. I don't suppose anybody's crying about that, are they?
No, from either side, though, probably. I mean, this is because Gary Lineker's announced, obviously, in the wake of his sort of posts that were seen as anti-Semitic, which they were really, because he says he inadvertently used an emoji that he didn't realise was offensive, and that was his defence. But instead of staying another year and doing the World Cup in America next year, he's going now, leaving the BBC, which will cost him 800 grand, according to the Telegraph, so he's leaving without a payoff. But in reality, Gary Lineker's a pretty rich bloke. He's got a very successful podcast company. I think his estimated wealth is 30 or 40 million pounds, and he's going to be working very quickly. A problem, isn't he? So I don't think it's much of a story, is it really?
No, we were just saying earlier, we reckon our boss has probably had a little phone call.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm not a huge football fan. He's an astonishingly good broadcaster, and he's not going to be short of work. And even if he was short of work, he's extremely wealthy, so he'll be fine.
I'm sure he's looking at 800 grand like you and I would look at a tenner, maybe, and going,
he can live without it.
I can manage. Post fat jabs to half of all adults, says Blair. Weight loss jabs by post should be offered to half of the population. The Tony Blair Institute has said the think tank is calling for a mass NHS rollout of medication using digital-first methods where patients can either have an online consultation rather than visiting a doctor in person. They should be targeted at the over 40s via health checks. I mean, look, we're learning every day about the benefits of these jabs, aren't we? Every day there seems to be another story that comes out saying it can fight against cancers, it can prevent heart attacks, it can prevent dementia. I mean, there's so much about these jabs that there's not some is not known, but the more we learn about them, the more that people are going, well, do you know what, these could be a game changer.
Massively so. I mean, the Telegraph's talking about it saving £3.5 billion from the benefits bill in terms of people losing weight and getting back to work. But you're right, the number of things that these potential jabs are able to cure now, potentially. I mean, we don't know all the details, and I always think of these things when we think about smoking in the early days, 50, 60 years ago.
Doctors prescribed them.
And people didn't realise smoking was bad for you, and look how that ended up. But all the research coming out suggests it is good in multiple areas, and the arguments for taking these jabs seem to be very, very high. I would just say, though, this talking about sending them by post, I still think that all of this needs to be done on medical advice and not just people reading newspaper articles or looking at stuff on the internet. So it's one of those things I think sounds sensible, and the Tony Blair Institute's very good at sort of future thinking and futurology and that sort of thing and where we go next. But I would want it to be medicated, prescribed by a GP or handled in that way.
And have your blood checked, all of those checks as well that some people might need. But you know what, these drugs have been around for a very long time as diabetic treatments.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, I suppose it's off book now. It's off what it was originally prescribed for, but it is still interesting. And they're saying, actually, that when they come off patent, because Eli Lilly is making an absolute fortune out of these things at the moment. Weight Watchers in the US have just gone bankrupt.
Yeah.
I mean, all these diet books and diet companies are going, right, that's it, we're done.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You wouldn't.
Why would you go on a diet?
Well, that whole industry about losing weight now potentially sort of lost a fell swoop, really, with the invention of these.
I mean, it was like horse-drawn carts when the combustion engine came along. They all went, all right, that's horses gone. And that's it. It's one of those big moments in time. The Guardian, EU deal puts Britain back on the world stage, says Starmer, and then allies in warning to Netanyahu over Gaza. So Netanyahu vowing Israel would take control of all of Gaza as airstrikes killed more than 60 people. An entire city was declared a combat zone, and the senior minister said the army would wipe out what remained of Palestinian Gaza. That's illegal, right?
Yeah, and it's shocking. It's a really it should be across all the front pages. It's not, because obviously we're more interested in the trade deal because it's newer and it affects the UK directly, but what's happening in Gaza really should be across all the front pages, but we're dominated by the trade deals and what's happening with the Trump-Putin phone call.
I mean, the trouble is, what's the answer? What's the solution? Yeah. And so far in history, no one has been able to come up with anything. Right, again, the FT, you would not be surprised to learn that the UK and EU agree post-Brexit reset of trade links at a showpiece summit. And UBS, that's a bank, deploys AI-created analyst avatars as demand for video presentation rises. They're using artificial intelligence to turn its analysts into avatars.
It's the advance of AI, isn't it? Taking over somebody else's job.
I'll be an AI one day, won't I? Just be a...
Hopefully not too soon.
Hopefully not too soon. The Mirror, the Daily Mirror, Lineker, I'm sorry for the hurt and upset I caused. I did believe his apology, actually. I don't know if you saw it.
Yes, I did too.
It looked pretty heartfelt to me.
Yeah, he'd made a mistake. I mean, he's not the first time he sort of got into dodgy territory in terms of he's very outspoken on a lot of issues, particularly the Middle East. But I think the particular offence he caused in that particular tweet, he did not mean to do it. He did not realise that the...
And he took it, he said, look, I should have checked. I should have been better. I should have been more diligent. Yes. But I did think that his apology was real and wasn't just one of those brush off, I'm sorry if you were offended type things. The Mirror is saying, not surprisingly, Kia deal is win-win. PM says British shoppers, tourists and businesses will feel the benefit. Keir Starmer hails the UK's deal with the EU as a win-win. So the Mirror, at least, looking at the positive.
Yeah, Labour's supporting paper, and you'd expect that. And if those things do happen in terms of the Mirror highlights in particular, faster passport checks, less red tape for businesses, well, let's see. If those things happen, then I think people will be impressed. But that is still a sort of fairly much a lone voice apart from the FT against most of the other papers are using the language of it's a surrender over betrayal, fishing rights, all that sort of thing.
And again, the King there with Beckham, David Beckham at the Chelsea Flower Show. So today was the day to have gone.
Yes, that's when all the celebs are there.
That's when all the celebs were there. The Daily Mail, the day the Brexit dream died, done up like a kipper, doesn't even begin to cover the PM's sellout. And that's from Richard Littlejohn and Andrew Neil. The rush to throw in our lot with the stagnant EU is unfathomable. Starmer's surrender is the front page there. He's not going to win this, is he?
No, not in the media battle, because the papers are reverting to sort of their party lines on it. Those that were strongly pro-Brexit, I think this is a terrible deal and it's a surrender, and the small minority of papers that were sort of wanted Britain to stay in the EU are saying it's a pretty good deal, let's see what happens. So they've, again, it's despite the government's attempt in saying that they don't want to relitigate Brexit, unfortunately that's exactly what the sort of key protagonists are doing. They are relitigating Brexit, and those that were supporters of it at the time are saying he's betrayed the country, and those that were against it are saying, well, actually this deal looks quite good. And if you listen to people like the Federation of Small Businesses who were quoted on one of the papers, they're saying it's positive, it's a good step forward. So the people who are actually doing the business and doing the trade seem to be reasonably impressed with it, apart from the fishermen and fisherwomen, and the others are just sort of hugely critical of what it sees as, the Mail puts it, leaves us subject to EU laws and courts while paying for the privilege. There will be some costs involved with some of these schemes, because some of the schemes that have to be administered and Britain's got to pay into them, particularly when it comes to things like defence and some of those other options. But on balance, it would look like it's something that could benefit our trade, which surely has to be good.
Certainly, if we get dibs on the defence deal. Yes. Because we already know that America is saying you've got to pay more, and we're not going to come and help you. So so we do need to bolster our defence, and we know that over the next sort of 5 to 10 years we've got to be spending a lot of money. And before any of these talks happened, we were excluded from any of the money that the whole of the rest of Europe was going to spend on defence, and that's good for our steel industry. and that's good for our defence industry if we get some of that money.
Yes, we could benefit from EU loans for defence work, and we know that across Europe we're going to have to spend more on defence. If there's contracts to be won there, then British firms should be getting a slice of that.
Should be getting them, yeah. And also, of course, let's not forget that we are the only other nuclear power, so Europe will rely on us should Putin decide that half of Ukraine or a third of Ukraine isn't enough for him. So we'll see. The Sun newspaper, Starmer agrees to take rules from Brussels, bow down to EU judges, pay billions for the privilege, throw open our borders, that's let French plunder our fish for 12 years, and in return he gets a 0.3% growth by 2040, done up like a kipper, they're saying, showing a picture of a kipper. Look, we already pay billions, we're continuing to pay billions because of some of the organisations we're still involved in, and that was part of the Brexit deal, that we had to pay our way out. Throw open our borders to 18 to 30-year-olds for a short amount of time, that is... and let French plunder our fish for 12 years. I mean, that, as we said, that was a deal that was already done. They've just agreed to leave it for 12 years as opposed to doing it once every year. I don't know. I don't see it as that. I don't see it as the betrayal.
No, I mean, I don't think it is. I mean, the big picture of the kipper there and the headline done up like a kipper on the front of the Sun, it makes it sound as though something has changed, and really all that's happening with fishing is what was going on for the last decade is now going to go on for another 12 years. It is not a new thing, as we keep saying. I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, literally, in terms of food and trade. Let's see what happens. But in terms of the communities that are directly affected, businesses, food preparation companies and people over here in the UK that want to export, they seem to be saying it's a good thing. So let's see.
And it's interesting because I was looking into this earlier about the costs involved, and you know, the HMRC, £7.5 billion a year just in paperwork for those small companies.
Yeah,
7.5 billion a year in paperwork.
Yeah.
To get through HMRC and so they can deliver stuff to, I mean...
Huge cost, and also just the time it takes businesses. If you're a small company in Cornwall and you're exporting oysters or fish to French restaurants in Paris, they just simply couldn't get through the processing time to get their stuff to the restaurants while it was still fresh.
Yeah.
So they effectively lost those markets, and this may be a way of restoring them.
It may be, yeah. Let's take a break. Vincent and I'll be back in just a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it is Petrie here with you, and with me is Vincent Moss going through the papers for Tuesday. Again, the Metro is saying Brexit battle number 2 begins. So again, I think just trying to wind people up a little bit actually. Because I'm not sure it is. Brexit is done. This is just trying to iron out a few issues, I would have said.
Yeah, and the Metro's coverage is fairly neutral, fairly positive, talks about it as a win-win. Keir Starmer referring to it as a win-win that will lower prices. Well, that'll be the key thing. Let's see if prices do actually come down, because that's what people really care about at the end of the day. Will it get cheaper? Will my shopping basket get cheaper? And will some of these things like border checks actually happen, and in terms of the easing of them and it being easy to get through passport control? Yeah,
and also this youth experience that some papers are touting as a throwing open our borders. Let's be fair, our borders are pretty porous as they are. But this youth experience scheme, like the one that I took advantage of to go to Australia, I was only allowed to be there for a year. That was that, and I had to pay insurance, and I had to, for healthcare and things like that. If he's talking about, it won't be the same as it was. It's not free movement. That he's not saying, right, from such and such a day, anybody from Europe can come across here and stay here forever. It will be a scheme like the one that I used in Australia that will say, right, you've got a visa for a year, you can work, and then you have to skedaddle in.
Exactly.
It might be 2 years, it might be 3 years, but still it will not be open borders as it was.
Yeah,
so that's disingenuous to say.
Yeah, the Metro says time limits are yet to be agreed, but there will be time limits. There'll be limits on numbers, and there'll also be controls and rules on using the NHS and things like that. You can't just come over.
It certainly was in Australia for me.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had to pay insurance. I had to pay for my medical care.
Yeah.
Should I need it? And look, and once the year ran out, I had to leave. There was no question of me staying.
Oh yes, and if Australia they catch you as an overstayer and you've overstayed your visa, you're in real problem.
Well, you can't ever go back.
Yeah.
Or you can't go back for like 10, 20 years or whatever. But look, again, I'm quite happy with the youth experience scheme. It's not the same as throwing open the borders.
Exactly. It's not just about EU young people coming here. It's about the fact at the moment our young people are denied the chance to go and experience so many other things. That's why a lot of them go to Bali and Southeast Asia, is because a lot of the European options have been closed down to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a text here from Adam who said, Brexit has been a complete disaster. I'm under 25 and I know no one who sees any positives at all. So for somebody like Adam, who's under 25, the idea that he could go and, work in Paris for a year, or Spain, or even one of the skiing resorts in France or whatever, I mean, that we had that opportunity and it's been taken away from the young people.
That's right, exactly. I mean, and young people in particular tend to be very much of that ilk and tend to be looking towards Europe, and it's older people who obviously much more like to vote in general elections, which is why they've got to be considered very carefully by politicians who tend to take a less positive view of the EU.
Yeah. And the Daily Star, which I think had lost its way for a while, but now this is very funny. Bozo Keir's orange ball chewing Brussels gimp. This is what Boris Johnson called, in a very grown-up way, Keir Starmer an orange ball chewing gimp for his EU deal. I don't know how Boris Johnson knows quite so much about what gimps do.
No, well, he's always had very colourful turn of phrase and colourful language, and it's a comment I think he's written in another newspaper column, but the Daily Star of picked that up and mocked up Keir Starmer in what I assume is a gimp outfit, and they've got their Boris Johnson also as a clown underneath him. So neither of them have come out of it particularly well.
No, but is that a gimp outfit? I wouldn't know a gimp outfit. It smacked me in the face.
And it
seems
either.
to have bosoms as well. Keir does, but
it's very bizarre.
It's a very bizarre. And he hasn't got an orange ball in his mouth.
No, he hasn't.
But it is interesting that Boris Johnson seems to know about the chewing of a orange ball whilst wearing a gimp outfit.
He's an expert in that area, potentially, yes. Yeah.
That doesn't really surprise me. Right, that's the front pages. What have you found that you like?
Well, we were talking about the Chelsea Flowers show earlier, and I've an interesting story in the Daily Mail, not about the flowers so much, but it's a really lovely picture of Queen Camilla cuddling her new rescue dog Molly, who she'd got from Battersea Cats and Dogs Home, and it's just a really nice picture. Although it looks she might be at the. I don't think she's at the Chelsea Flower Show, because I would imagine they don't let dogs in, but maybe they made an exception for her, and it's just a lovely picture with her rescue. It's significant, of course, because she's the I think she's the patron.
She's the patron. She's one of the patrons
of the Dogs Home, and I think
Sue Perkins is as well. I think.
Yeah, it's really important at the moment, I think, because a lot of these rescue centres are getting overburdened with dogs, because so many people are now going back to work full time. They got their dogs during COVID when they were at home, and they now realise they can't manage with them if they're going back to work full time. So there's an awful lot of rescue dogs out there, and it's nice to see the Queen doing her bit to kind of make the case.
Yeah,
for
I agree.
rescues.
But again, a lot of these rescues have separation anxiety really badly, because during COVID, of course, nobody left the house.
Yeah.
So that's what people are finding difficult with their dogs, is that they got them, they didn't train them properly, and they have massive separation anxiety. So now people are trying to get back to work, they can't leave their dogs.
That's true, isn't it? Yeah, because they're so used to people being there all the time.
It's a big issue. And also, I'm going to say, I found Battersea Cats and Dogs Home really rather snooty. I suspect they weren't with her, but they were with me. I
suspect not many people are snooty with the Queen, are they? Potentially.
No, potentially not. But it is a lovely thing to do if you can. If you've got the time and you've got the skill to rescue, it is a beautiful thing to do. What else have you got?
Interesting story in the Telegraph about parking. Now, it sounds a bit dry, but stick with me on it, because we've got this issue at the moment recently with councils levying council tax on second homes, and some people have said, well, I've just inherited it from my mum, and it's not in a seaside hotspot where there's pressure on homes. It's in Bolton or Barnsley or Blackpool. Well, it seems as though they're doing a similar thing with parking charges, local councils, and the Telegraph's talking about Salcombe in Devon, where if you're a visitor, and 60% of the homes there are second homes, lots of people visit, it's £10 a day to park, but if you're a resident, you can buy a £5 annual permit, and it's only £8 a day to park. And I just wonder, I think we're seeing a lot more of councils looking at two-tier charges on things. First it started with the council tax. Well, it'd be very interesting if councils now go down this route of two-tier charging for parking. So if you live in the borough or you live in the town, you pay a lower rate, and that may be a good thing. But if you're an incomer or a tourist, you pay a bit more. So I just thought it was an interesting idea that locals apparently have criticised this, and some of the local fish shop in Salcombe is saying it's really hit day trippers going to his shop because there's a two-tier parking charge. I mean,
that's short-sighted, isn't it? Because tourists, you may not like them, but a lot of places that, in Devon and Cornwall and around the coastline, that is their bread and butter. And so if you start to hack them off and people go, well, I'm not going to go there because the parking is too expensive, then you might get rid of the tourists, but you also get rid of your money.
Exactly. And we want to revive our high streets and shopping centres and things. But I think one of the things it reflects is that because all local authorities are so cash-strapped, one of the ways they're all trying to raise revenue, whether that's in London or whether it's in a rural area or in a seaside area, they're all putting their parking charges up through the roof because they see it as a kind of, they sort of sell it to themselves as it's a green tax. Because
it's not about green
at all. No, it's not.
It's
about revenue raising. A lot of people who are elderly or there's no bus services in certain areas, they rely on their car. They want to drive to the local shops, or in this case the local chippy, and they can't do it because councils are absolutely fleecing motorists. Now, I accept the fact they've got a shortfall with their funding in many areas, and they'll blame central government for that. But to try and fleece the poor motorists for it just seems counterproductive. But again, it's going on in all across the country. Yeah, it's an easy hit.
It's not very clever, but they can do it. And then you hear about councils. I can't remember which council it was now, but they had that Wiggly Road on a coastline, and they'd spent £2 million on redoing this road, and they called it the Wobbly Road or something. They had wiggly lines in the road, literally.
Clevedon.
Was it
in
Clevedon?
Somerset,
Yes.
I think it was, yes.
And then they've just had to undo it all. So it cost £2 million to put it in, and £2.5 million to put it in, and £500,000 to take it out. And it was just painting on the road.
Yeah, it was. It's crazy. I mean, and that's a lovely seaside town in Somerset with a beautiful pier and a nice place to visit.
They stop people from looking at the ocean.
Exactly. So,
ridiculous.
Yeah, councils are not great when it comes to decision-making some of the time.
And sometimes they're wasting all that money and then putting parking charges up.
Exactly.
It's madness. It's absolutely madness. I don't get it at all. Yeah, but that wiggly line thing, I don't know how. If I'd come across that as a driver, I think I'd have lost my mind.
You probably pick up a parking fine for not obeying the wiggly lines, so because you don't know what's going on. So, yeah,
most definitely would have done. Vincent, it's great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and taking us through the newspapers for tomorrow and for Tuesday, I should say, shouldn't I? Just ruined that. Thank you, Vincent. Right, coming up, it's just you and me, and Brexit makes 3. Is this Brexit 2.0? Is this something that you feel betrayed about? Do you think this is the end of democracy, that your democratic vote is being ignored? In what way do you think you have been betrayed by Keir Starmer? And do you really believe that Brexit was an all-singing, all-dancing success? And if you think we've lost something today, what have we lost? What is it that we've lost exactly? I mean, the fishing deal was already there. None of this has been agreed upon as it is. But listen, I'd love to hear from you on this. 0344 499 1000 and message me on 87222.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. How lovely to have your company this morning. Listen, we're talking about what is commonly being called, and most of the front pages for today, Tuesday, as being a betrayal of Brexit, that Keir Starmer has betrayed us. He has gone back to the EU, cap in hand, and he sold us down the river. And I want to know whether you agree with that or not. Look, a couple of things. I don't think we can really honestly say, with our hands on our hearts, that Brexit has been an unmitigated success, can we? We can't say that. We were promised in the referendum that we would have control of our borders. We never were part of Schengen, by the way, so we already pretty much had control of our borders. We took a quota of people, but we agreed that quota. They couldn't force a number of immigrants onto us. Net migration since Brexit has practically tripled from 333,000 people per year, which we dream of now, to just shy of 1 million in the past year. So where is the control of our borders, right? And one newspaper is suggesting that we've now lost control of our borders. Look, the biggest issue, I think, was for the boats to stop coming over. I think that's what most people meant by control of our borders. Did anybody really mind people coming over from, Poland to build our houses for us, or Spain to work picking crops from the EU? Well, look, we're not returning to the free movement of people. That is not going to happen. And this youth mobility scheme will be youths between the age of, I think it's 18 to 30, without dependents. Somebody said here with their dependents. It's without dependents. Like, I went to Australia on a youth mobility scheme that Australia run. I was allowed a visa for a year to go and work in Australia, and that was it. And I had to pay for my healthcare in advance and all of those things. That's the sort of thing that Keir Starmer is looking at. And it's not just about EU young people coming here. It is about British youth being able to go overseas, maybe, improve their French, do an art course in Paris or in Italy, or whatever it might be. It's not opening our borders. And look, at the moment, net migration, like I said, is 3 times what it was before Brexit, because while there was free movement of European people, we didn't have to take in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people from places like India to work in care homes or to work in the NHS or to work in other sectors where the British people either don't want to or can't or won't work in. So that's why we've seen an explosion in this legal net migration, because we reduced migration to almost nothing from Europe. And those places, those had to be replaced in order to keep the economy growing. So that's the truth of what's happened. Now, whether you like it or not, that's the situation. We've swapped one lot of people for another lot of people. Where's the control there? We have less control of our borders. We're seeing more and more boats coming through every single day. The fishing deal. This isn't a new fishing deal. This was already in place for the last 10 years. For 10 years, that was there. It was due to come to an end in 2026, or not to an end, but to be renegotiated year on year on year. And what Keir Starmer has agreed to is to say, right, 12 years, we'll renegotiate at the end of that. There's nothing to say that year on year on year wouldn't mean the same deal being done every single year. And also it makes the whole situation unstable. People don't know what they can invest in, if they're going to buy a boat, if they're not going to buy a boat, whatever. So Brexit hasn't been a success, right? And there's a lot of things that might make our lives easier, like e-passports, going through, going through borders quickly, pet passports, trade deals that mean that less paperwork has to be done for small businesses. And it's interesting that the trade organisations and the businesses are hailing this as a potential win. They're saying this is really good for us, for trade. Some of the monies that there are 388,000 fewer jobs now in the UK in financial services. That's nationwide. 92,000 fewer in London. The average Brit is £2,000 a year worse off. For some reason, Londoners are £3,400 a year worse off. I don't quite know how that maths is done, but these are all been done by independent bodies. We have never, ever come close to replacing the trade. We were promised, all of us were promised, these trade deals would be coming in thick and fast and we would be loaded. We were going to have trade deals all over the world, weren't we? They were going to be amazing. Haven't happened, not really. Just done a trade deal with India. This doesn't stop us doing trade deals with other countries, by the way. This isn't like it used to be. When we were in the EU, we weren't allowed to trade with other countries unless we had, EU approval or a EU deal or whatever it was, or the whole of the EU had a deal with that country. Now we can still go and get trade deals with, I don't know, the island full of penguins, maybe, who knows. But America is was never ever going to replace the EU. For a start, it's 100 million people fewer in America than there are in the EU trading bloc. And there's 25% tariffs on cars, 10% tariffs on everything else. We're not going to get a free trade deal with America. It's not going to happen. We know it's not going to happen. Trump's not even being nice to his neighbours, let alone to us. We're not going to get a free trade deal. Do you feel betrayed by Keir Starmer? And look, this isn't a deal yet, by the way. This is talks to eventually end up with a deal. We're being a little bit premature. But I want you to call me and tell me what benefit of Brexit you're afraid of losing from this new memorandum of talks. What benefit of Brexit are you afraid that this takes away? 0344 499 1000. Well, just to wind you up even further, let's listen to Keir Starmer talking about today's agreement.
Today we have struck this landmark deal with the EU, a new partnership between an independent Britain and our allies in Europe. This is the first UK-EU summit. It marks a new era in our relationship. And this deal is a win-win. It delivers what the British public voted for last year. It gives us unprecedented access to the EU market, the best of any country outside of the EU or EFTA, all while sticking to the red lines in our manifesto about not rejoining the single market, the customs union, and no return to freedom of movement.
So there you go. That is our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who you think betrayed you today, talking about the agreement, which it isn't a deal. I just wish he hadn't said, it's not yet a deal, by the way. If you read it, which I did, it's not a deal. It's not agreed, but clearly it will be, but it isn't as yet. And the fishing rights seems to be the big conversation as well at the moment, those fishing rights. So let's listen to Sir Keir Starmer talking about them.
We've reached a deal today on fish, protecting our access, rights and fishing areas, with no increase in the amount that EU vessels can catch in British waters. Our fishing industry will also benefit from the new SPS agreement, which slashes costs and red tape for our exports into the European market. And we already sell 70% of our seafood into that market. So that is really significant. It is also opening the gates to selling shellfish back into the EU. And I can also announce today that we're investing £360 million into our fishing industry to help them take advantage of this deal.
So there you go. That was what he was saying about fishing. This is a deal that has already existed for 10 years and has now been extended. So let's go to your calls now. Robert is in Hertfordshire. Hello, Robert. Good morning. Are you there, Robert? Are you there, Mother? No, I haven't got Robert. Let me try again. Are the phone lines working? Yeah, Robert? Robert? No. OK. Then I'll read some messages out. I don't care. Oh, please don't let it be. Please don't let it be one of those mornings. Ugh, I can't cope. I'm already not sleeping. You can hear it in my voice. Hi, Petrie. Love your shows. It isn't always about what we have lost, but I have felt for some time now that government, it seems, is intent on making life harder and want to rip us off at every level. And that's from Phil. Yeah, I totally agree. Look, the devil is always in the detail. And we haven't seen the detail on this. The only things that I've seen is this memorandum of agreement. And it's not a firmly set deal yet. I don't know why, but I agree with you. I don't trust them, and I'd want to have a look more closely at the details as well. Dan is in Warrington. Hello, Dan.
Hiya, Petrie. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you so much for pulling your truck over.
Well, you know, we've had a few chats in the past.
We have. I don't
normally get on with it, but Petrie, I'm going to do battle because. You know when you was on with Vincent as well, and you said that most Brexiteers voted to stop the boats. It wasn't about general immigration. Well, I'm a truck driver. I'm ex-armed forces, and I voted to stop mass immigration. Now, just let me tell you why. When I left the army as a truck driver, before I joined the army in 2000, this mass immigration wasn't a thing. When I left, the jobs that I originally had, working in warehouses and things, predominantly Eastern Europeans at that point. When I became a truck driver, you couldn't get onto the proper contracts anymore, Petrie, the legacy contracts, because all these companies employing HGV drivers could bring in foreign nationals, and which they were doing, and paying them different wages and things like that. It was so tough to get a decent contract on a company that offers good legacy contracts. It was almost impossible. Now, when the Brexit vote happened, almost overnight for truck drivers in this country, it changed. We could get the proper contracts again. We could get the contracts with the big companies and long-term employment rather than having to be a limited company, Petrie. You know, that's what we voted for. It was to stop the mass. Now, I agree with you, Petrie, that it has tripled, but instead of coming over from the EU and taking the jobs like the truck driver jobs, etc., now they are working in the petrol stations from far-flung fields. And again, them legacy contracts have gone. You know, what was wrong before 19...
Well,
sorry,
what you're talking about here is that it benefited your trade, but with the immigration levels haven't gone down. It's just a different type of people coming in, right? On legal. Let's just talk about the legal migration for now. So, you know, we were at 333,000 people coming in, and now it's nearly 1 million a year coming in.
Yes.
And so there are people whose jobs are affected. It just doesn't happen to be yours at the moment. So, you know, what's changed is the birth rate is going down, and we're not having, you know, every person is supposed to have 2 babies in order to replace themselves, and people aren't doing that. So, you know, when we've got a declining and an aging population and a declining population, you know, the general consensus is we need people from outside of our country to do the jobs that aren't being done and can't be done because there aren't enough people being born and being trained and being, you know, put into those jobs whilst the population is aging. So that's what's fundamentally changed. We're never going to not have immigration. It's never going to happen.
No, I mean, I've never said we're not going to have immigration, Petrie, but so I'm a fuel tanker driver, and that's what I do. So I go onto petrol stations, and that has changed. If you look at the petrol stations, aren't owned by BP and Shell and Esso, they're owned by franchises, and these franchises now this is what they do. Since the European market has stopped, like you said, and we agree on, and things like that, and it's, you know, my industry has changed. These employers are bringing people in from India and Pakistan, and they're working on for lower wages.
Yeah, because they're addicted to this cheap labour.
So exactly. Exactly, because the companies are addicted to cheap labour, and the majority of people that vote Remain, and I think they're not working class. The majority of people that vote Brexit are working class. Now, the people that come over, the mass immigration, it's predominantly into working class communities, Petrie, predominantly them schools in working class communities. They're not living in the areas where the upper and middle classes are that voted to Remain, are they? They're coming to the working class communities, and that's what the Remain side just don't understand. And even when you talk about in care, for example, you know, I've got an uncle that needs care, and you know, he is now, as you say, he's being cared for by foreign people when they go in to see him, and he's not got the banter of the Brits anymore because they're not paying the proper wages for people that work in care to attract the British people into care. It's disgusting.
I agree. Listen, I completely agree with everything you're saying, but I don't see how Brexit changed any of that. Except for it changed the countries from which the people have come in. And when people talk about Brexit, they went, we want control of our borders. And you know, we did have that. We weren't part of Schengen. If there were immigrants that they wanted to send to us, we had to agree to a quota. We weren't forced a quota like every other European country was forced a quota of people to take. But we had the free movement of people, European people, who very often didn't come to live here forever. Whereas the immigrants we've got now do come to live here forever, because when you've got somebody from Europe who comes to the UK, right, the whole point of Europe is that the living standards are equitable. So we had people from Italy coming to live in the UK, which was an equitable economy, right? Equally expensive, equally cheap, equally free, equally democratic, all of those things. And so those people would often go back to Italy because it was the same. Now we've got people coming from Pakistan where it's not equitable, so they come here and they want to stay here. So we are worse off in that regard.
Yeah, and I agree with that second part of what you've just said. However, there was millions coming over from Eastern Europe, and they went back, and it stopped when Brexit happened, Petrie. Now,
I'll tell you when it stopped. The Polish have gone back, not just because of Brexit, but because they joined the EU. Romania is the same. When they joined the EU, it takes a few years for their economy to improve to the point where it's equitable. And so all of those Eastern Europeans have returned because they're now going back to a country, A, that they know, B, that they love, and C, that now is equitable to the UK or to the rest of Europe.
Petrie, they've not all gone back, and so when I joined the army and I was based in Germany and I went to Poland and I served in Poland and I've been to France and things like that. They're just not. You know, when you talked about Brits going over to work abroad, you talked about that with Vincent. There was not British truck drivers working in German companies. There was not British truck drivers and warehouse workers and working class people working. Yes, you might have found the odd person, but it just was not on the scale, Petrie, as what happened in this country.
But the Polish, there's a massive. No, hang on a minute. I have to argue with that because the Polish went all over Europe. There was a massive population of Polish workers in Germany, huge, and all over the rest of Europe. The Romanians too. They went all over Europe. It wasn't just to the UK. Now what we're seeing is countries like India and Pakistan, who are not living in an equitable economy, coming over to this country on a visa and then demanding to stay, whereas European workers are happy to return to the countries from which they came because they're not going back to somewhere worse. So what we've done is replace people who will eventually go home with people who won't.
That's not necessarily, that's not necessarily true that they've all gone back.
I'm not saying they've all gone back. I mean, I haven't counted them in and out, right? But a majority of them, French people, they love it here. They also love France. It's the same economy. It's the same freedoms. It's the same democracy. They're going to decide to go back eventually.
I mean, I agree with you that they went, the Polish people, if we're talking specifically about Polish people, that they went around Europe. How many Brits went over to Poland to work in these working?
But why would they? It's not. It wasn't an equitable economy. Why would a British person, until Poland has reached equality, why would a British person go to Poland and earn a tenth of the money? Of course, they're not going to.
This was part of the problem because what the companies have done in this country, whether it was back then from Poland and Eastern Europe or whether it's now from Pakistan and India, the companies in this country will pay the lowest wages and they will get away with not employing people on proper contracts. Nothing has got better since 1997, Petrie. We've had increased crime, we've had increased immigration. When we talk about, for example, it's always in the news about the water and the flood, the sewages being opened into our rivers. When we increase the population by 10 million people, and that's 10 million bums on seats in the toilets.
Listen, I know what you're saying and I agree, but we've swapped that 10 million for people who would go home with people who don't want to because it's not an equitable economy.
We've allowed that, haven't we?
Well, Brexit kind of forced it to happen.
No, because
we had to replace the Europeans with somebody, so we have to go further away to get them in the country because of declining birth rates and an ageing population.
We can't. I mean, the declining birth rates. We can't just. That's going to take a long time.
No, it's already happening. Honestly, Dan, look it up. Look it up. The ageing population and the lack of children being born in this country is a crisis. In fact, it's a crisis in every Western nation. And that's why immigration is at the levels that it is. If we don't sort out the birth rate and we don't sort out I don't know how we sort out the ageing population, we can't, then these economies and these countries die. So you either get people from Europe or you get people from further afield. Which is it?
So why does Japan do okay? Yes, I know they have the problems with the ageing population as well.
They've got a massive problem with an ageing population and a low birth rate. As I just said, all nations, all westernised nations have this problem now. Look at America. They're trying to pay people to have babies now. I mean, there is a real problem, and you look at every country with an ageing population and a declining birth rate, and then the gaps are filled with immigration. It just depends where you get those immigrants from. Dan, great to speak to you. And look, that is a positive of Brexit. You got your contract, but other people lost theirs. Quid pro quo. Quick break, back in a sec.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it is Petrie here with you, and we are talking about Starmer hails a new era of UK-EU relations. As Badenoch says, taking the deal has taken us backwards. OK, I'm just wondering if you do feel betrayed by this. Angie said, Petrie, we've always had use of the e-gate at passport control. It's up to each European country whether to allow us to use it, as far as I know, with this change. The talk is, although the deal hasn't been struck yet, like I said, none of it has, is that it would eventually change. But it will be up to country as to allow us to do that or not. But the sort of vague promises there that we wouldn't have those long queues anymore. I don't know. So I want to know if you feel that you've been betrayed, and I also want to know what you think you're losing from this conversation that has taken place, this memorandum of whatever it was called, that you had before. What are we losing by having closer ties to the EU? We're not having freedom of movement. That is not coming back. We are not going to have, new rules imposed on us. We're not going to have to take migrants. I don't know what we think we have lost. And I will remind you at this point that the fishing industry, although it is very, very important, it adds up to 0.03% of GDP. So suddenly everybody cares about fishing. But this is the same deal, by the way, that has been in existence for 10 years. It's now just been ratified for 12 years further, rather than at the end of next year having to do year by year. Every year going back to the table, agreeing, disagreeing, deciding what happens next. Every single year, that was the plan. So I just wonder what you feel you've lost today that you had yesterday. Sarah is in Liverpool. Hi, Sarah.
Good morning, Petrie.
Good morning. So, what have we lost?
Well, to be perfectly honest, we started to lose. We lost a hell of a lot when Boris signed the Brexit deal in 2020. We lost the European Health Exchange Scheme, which meant that if you could get treatment, if you needed treatment and it was somewhere else in the EU, you could actually get treatment without having to go, have a whip round.
Yeah, the EHIC
you didn't have
system,
that.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the councils, the local councils, that is, they used to get money off the EU, money that we paid in whatever, how many, 100 million, billion, whatever it was, and a good chunk of it used to come back through the European Social Fund, but also the local councils used to get money, because they worked out that 5 years after Brexit went through, Liverpool City Council would lose something like 100 million quid, rough guess. It was ridiculous money. I mean, can you imagine what a council could do with that kind of money?
Well, also farmers got subsidies, didn't they, to either produce or to lay fallow. If we had a glut of maize, farmers would be paid not to grow it. The so-called, butter mountains and wine lakes and all of that used to, that it managed that to make sure they wouldn't happen. So farmers did really well out of it.
They did. Farmers did really, really well out of it. There was deprived areas of the country. There used to be things like the European Social Fund. Liverpool actually was put back on its feet to the EU, and there were other parts of the country that were the same. Also, the freedom of movement, and also the one thing the country before Brexit and before 2016 and that damn vote was more or less cohesive. We were a bit united, let's be honest, but we'll say cohesive for now. And there was nobody thought about, home rule for Ireland or Scotland or Wales. It was, Northern Ireland joining with the Republic, slap my wrist. No one thought about it because everyone had the same rights. But since Brexit, the country has been more divided, more, again, it's been totally again, everyone's been at each other's throats. The politicians love that, divide and rule, of course. They just love that. No one,
but I mean, again,
everyone doesn't see what's going on.
And this is going to be controversial, so I'm going to be very careful how I word this. But again, we swapped migration from Europe, from a largely Christian societies, from largely culturally similar societies to our own, right? You would agree?
Yeah. With
nations that are not religiously or culturally aligned in the same way. And look, that is just a fact. And that's what I was saying, that we've replaced, look, whether you agree with migration or not, a lot of people say, oh, we don't need it, but trust me, if you look at the numbers, we do. So all we did was swap people coming from societies that we recognised and were culturally similar and religiously similar to our own with countries that were not as aligned. And maybe that has been the reason for some of the breakdown that we've seen. And as I was saying before, the European visitors that we had, the European people who came to stay here and work here and live here, a lot of them went back because they were equitable countries. They were the same in terms of finance. Look at Poland. Once Poland had been in the EU for a few years, Polish people don't want to come here anymore.
Yeah.
Because Poland's looking great. The Czech Republic is looking amazing now because of EU money, because of EU growth, because of EU partnership, because of EU trade deals, because of EU everything. And those societies have risen with the EU. And so those people are now going back, which is always what was going to happen.
And the Brexiteers, Boris and Farage and the rest of the boys and girls in that grotty little band, they fed on people's fear of otherness, and also the fact that people were grumbling about they played on austerity. Oh yeah, well look what we have to give to the EU. We don't get that back, which was total and utter lies. We got 90% of it back roughly. So,
but also the referendum was ruled.
People believe them.
Was ruled illegal. The entire referendum, and had it been an official referendum as opposed to an advisory one, it could have been reversed because it was ruled illegal, and people forget that conveniently. Don't talk about it.
That's it. People don't realize. I mean, that's what really gets up my nose because people don't realise that what happened was illegal, and also
because everyone was lied to.
Yeah. Also the fact that there was also, they reckon, whether it'll come out in the wash in a full royal commission or a public inquiry, that there were influences from abroad, and we all know where that came
Russia.
from.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah, they wanted to see instability.
Yeah, that's it, and he got it.
Yeah, well, they did get it, and we're now living proof of it. Sarah, thank you. Stephen, I'm going to come to you in a minute, if that's okay. I've just got to take a very quick break, otherwise I'm going to get my wrist slapped.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. This is Talk and it's Petrie here until 1 o'clock. And we're talking about the new era of UK-EU relations. Do you feel betrayed by what you were told yesterday? Stephen is in Liverpool. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Petrie. Not my favourite radio lady.
Not your favourite. I am your favourite. Well, am I your favourite?
You are my favourite. You always have been.
Thank you, my darling. I appreciate that.
I spoke to you about 2 years ago to do with mental health, so you've helped me out a lot. That's all I can say. I don't want to say too much about that now.
I'm really glad.
Okay, so we've been had off by a lot of people, and I feel that when I voted for Brexit 2016...
You didn't get it?
No, I didn't. I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
And I feel that what happened was that I allowed all the monkeys to run the zoo instead of, that's what it feels like. And literally the day after, when you regret, buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
Literally, that's what I had. Yeah, and I thought, what have I done here? I've stitched my own city up because Liverpool's been built on it's been rebuilt on EU money, stuff like that.
Yeah, and what people didn't realise, and this is why the whole referendum was a complete and utter lie. It was terrible, and both sides are guilty of that. Both Remain and Leave. They were both appalling in the whole Brexit debate. Is because they didn't mention that places like Liverpool, that our own government wouldn't spend money on. Right? If their blooming lives depended on it, they didn't give a stuff about Liverpool or parts of Wales.
Managed to climb back in the day.
Exactly. And massive parts of Wales, cities and towns in Wales. And the only reason they got any money is because the EU would look at Liverpool or look at these cities around the country and go, well, your government's not going to give you any money, so we will, to improve the city. And nobody was told about that.
Well, people don't. I mean, I'm a Liverpool fan, and people realise that, like, for example, when the national anthems played at Wembley, stuff like that, we booed the hell out of it because we go right the way back to the managed decline situation, and then you go further on to Hillsborough. But anyway, so I voted for Brexit, or what I thought was Brexit. So what I feel like has happened is, when you get somebody ringing you up and telling them that they're from your bank or something like that, and you actually believe it. So therefore, what's happened here is I would say 51% of us have been victim of a scam call here.
Yeah.
And basically, I could see today. I mean, when Keir Starmer, I voted at Labour in the last election, but I don't particularly like that guy. That's not the type of Labour I'm into. I'm more of a Jeremy Corbyn.
Okay.
So
I'm not a fan of Jeremy Corbyn, but I know what you mean about that sort of more left, proper Labour.
Socialist. But even then, no, I wouldn't even vote for them, no. And, I had in my head for a while that I was going to, next time I'd vote for Reform, what they Remain, they call themselves, and then I just thought to myself, the amount of trouble they're causing, and they're just, and I could see the big smiles on the lady that's in charge of the EU, the massive smile on her face, basically saying, "Oh, you got it wrong, have you? Yeah, there you go. So you're creeping back to us now, are you?" So basically the best thing he can do is forget these silly little deals and just have another referendum. But he's not going to do that because it would save his job for a start, because it's going to be a Remain vote.
It would be a Remain. I mean, by all intents and purposes, looking at the vote now, only 30% of Britons now believe it was right for the UK to vote to leave the EU, versus 55% who say it's wrong.
I know.
And that is extraordinary, because all the things, like I keep saying, about this control of borders. We've just swapped one set of people for another set of people.
Yeah.
That was a lie.
Can I say, Petrie, though, the problem is that when they show you pictures of the people getting in the boats on the beach in France, and the French police doing nothing about it, where they've been given money for it, you just think to yourself, okay, so the French are laughing at us as well now, which they always have done. And yet, World War II, yet they needed us. But, you know, that's another story.
But again, you can't really blame them. You know, France doesn't want all of these people either.
Well, see the problem, and what people say, and what used to get me, and the reason why I voted for it in the first place, because I could see them going through all these, what I call safe countries all the way through, France, Italy, those type of places. Even Germany were taking quite a lot of people in at one stage, yeah. And then they started regressing it because there was crime rate or something like that, but they started to blame all the immigrants.
But they weren't able to integrate such a huge number of people. That was a huge mistake.
I lived abroad, Petrie. I used to live in southern Turkey a long time ago when I was working, and going back probably when you were at school. And
I doubt it. I'm older than you think.
I think we're about the same. And I used to live in Spain as well. So the thing is, but I only intended to ever be there for 6 months. Now, with the people before Brexit, when I was on the buses years ago, and I worked with a lot of Poles, Albanians, Slovakians, all that type of people. And they were great, and they were really hard workers, but they didn't intend to be here for the rest of their lives.
Exactly.
Very few of them. I would say about 30% of them stayed, and the rest of them went. But when Brexit turned up, and then even worse, then you had COVID, because I ended up with COVID myself, and you know, it just basically, because a lot of people were working from home, and still people are working from home now, because, I mean, I was talking to someone today, and it said, "Oh, I'm working from home." I'm like, "But COVID was, that was years ago. You're still working from home. So you're doing a good number.
You're doing all right."
Well,
I mean, that was the point that I was making. That a lot of the Europeans, and particularly when Poland first acceded to the EU and Romania and the Czech Republic and places like that, they were not equitable economies, right? That's why they joined the EU, and then with the benefit of trade and the benefit of all of those things, their economies improved.
The way I look at it now, see, the thing is, we've got this thing with Russia and the Ukraine. If we were all in the EU now, he'd think twice. He'd still have a go, but he'd think twice, because he thinks the USSR still exists as little Putin, and he's just.
But he wants it back. Yeah.
He's like a miniature Stalin, isn't he? So.
Yeah, the one good thing about yesterday with this new reset with the EU is it would have really hacked Putin off. Yeah. He would have been really annoyed at that. Because that's like, oh, God, they're friends again. I didn't want them to be friends.
I didn't want all those people to be friends. I mean, I remember the World Cup in Russia in 2018, and he hates football. He's got nothing to do with it. And every time all of a sudden, the Russian team started doing well, and me and my friends used to joke that probably all the families are all being kidnapped, held hostage somewhere until you get at least to the quarterfinals because the president's watching. And all of a
They're all in a bunker somewhere.
Yeah, because the team weren't doing very well before the World Cup, and they only got there because they were hosting it. Then next minute, they're in the quarterfinals, and we thought, what's this? You know, it's like watching Everton do something, and they don't do much.
That was naughty.
Yeah, like for example, now I live near John Lennon Airport, okay? So the amount of weekends, people that go away to Poland for the weekend now, to crack off places like that, the planes are full every weekend, and it's British people going over there.
I know. I know. There's a lot of people buying houses and properties and stuff in Poland now because their economy's improved.
There's places like even like the Hungary and I mean,
Czech Republic, all of these places, and they've gone back in large numbers, and that was always their plan.
I mean, what made me laugh the other day is when Starmer was going on about something to the Albanian president.
Oh, yeah.
And he went, I haven't agreed to that. And he went, no. And he went, looked at him, and he's 6'6", and he went, well, I better rethink that one.
That was really embarrassing, actually.
That was hilarious.
Do you know what, Stephen? I love your voice. I could talk to you all night. I really could. Thank you for calling. I honestly, 100%, really enjoy talking to you. Thank you. Stephen there. The only reason I'm finishing with Stephen, basically, is because I need to take a break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning to you. This is Talk and it's Petrie here with you for the next 8 minutes, roughly. And we are talking about the new era of UK-EU relations that Keir Starmer was hailing just yesterday. The newspapers are full of betrayal, and we've been sold down the river and stitched up like a kipper, and all of those things. The truth is the deal hasn't actually been done. If you read the memorandum of agreement, it is a memorandum of agreement. It is not a full deal, although it does look like it will. Some of these things will come off, and many of you are concerned about the fishing. This one from Joanna says he's signed fishing away for 12 years when areas that were just recovering from years of decimation from factory ships, unlike traditional vessels, they destroy everything. Well, nothing's changed, actually, Joanna, because it's the same deal. It's just extended. So for the last 10 years, what's going to happen for the next 12 has already been happening. So there is no, recovery from decimation because those boats were never stopped. It was supposed to last until 2026 and then be agreed year on year. So there's nothing to say that the same agreement wouldn't have been hatched every single year. But it is just, they've just said it's 12 years. Now, some people, I potentially think that's too long. I think maybe they could have split that and done a 6-year deal or a 5-year deal, but it is the same deal. So nothing will change that has changed for the last 10 years will change for the next 12. And you go on to say, I don't even want to think what under 30s free movement with dependents will do. Well, there's no mention of dependents. There's no dependents, and it won't be free movement. It will be a capped number. And I can only equate it to the youth scheme that Australia has, that I was able to partake in. And it was very official. You had 1 year and that was it, and then you were out. And you had to pay towards your healthcare. And there will be a similar thing with this, and it will be capped. Those numbers have not been agreed yet, but it will be capped. And you go on to say, loss of jobs, pressure on the NHS, housing, and our teenagers trying to enter university, plus returns won't be checked, and they will probably find a right to stay. Ask yourself this, Joanna, why? Why would they? I could have stayed in Australia, couldn't I, as an illegal? I didn't want to. I wanted to come back. And many young people who travel from beautiful countries like Italy or Greece, I mean, ask yourself, why would they want to stay here? They're going back to a country that is equitable in freedom, in democracy, in economy. Why would they want to find a right to stay here? Think about it. You're conflating, you're mixing this up with people from countries that are not equitable in terms of economy and freedom and democracy. They might want to stay here because they don't want to go back to a country that isn't as good as this one. But let me tell you, a lot of the European countries, including Germany, I love with a passion. I'd quite happily go and live there. Cue the texts. Well, why don't you then? Anyway, yeah. So I think there's a lot of I don't know, confusion over this. It's not that big a deal, what's being suggested, and it's certainly not suggesting free movement of people under the age of 30. There's no suggestion of that at all. So anyway, Malcolm.
Hello.
Hello, Malcolm.
Are you all right, Ducky?
I'm all right. How are you from Nottingham?
I'm fine.
Good.
Right, yeah, I'm from Nottingham. Right. I can't believe the way that this country is run by a lot of dictators.
Right.
Starmer is the most evilest person I've ever listened to.
What, even more than Putin or Kim Jong-un?
But it could probably be even worse.
Okay, all right. Okay, no, listen, I'm no fan of Keir Starmer. Let me tell you, I am not a fan.
I'm not.
No, but I don't think he's as bad as Kim Jong Un.
No,
I'm just saying.
No, I don't mean in that own way. Is dictated to the British people the way it's treated Westby women and everybody else.
I agree with that. Yeah, old people, the winter fuel allowance. Yeah,
everything this person has done to this country within 10 months is a disgrace to the British people.
I don't know. I'm not going to argue with you on that. I think that Labour have not covered themselves in glory. I think that they've let down a lot of people. I'm very vocal about the way that the winter fuel allowance was stolen from people. I'm very vocal about the way that disabled people are going to be treated with their benefits. I think it's all absolutely disastrous. I agree.
Labour has destroyed the working class.
Ironically.
They have worked damn hard for their way that they want to live. But the point is, people have voted for this government and have been treated like, I'm not going to swear, they have been treated like animals.
Yeah, listen, I don't disagree with anything that you're talking about. I think that they have they've made some basic fundamental mistakes, and I had higher hopes, to be honest with you. But we didn't really vote them in. We voted the Tories out. That's the truth, and we've all ended up with a government that nobody really wanted.
The point is, they're all the same.
Yep, I agree.
They're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
The elite that don't care about their own British people.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Reform, they want to sell off the NHS.
Well,
you know, I mean, like you're saying, they're all the same.
Well, I'm an ex-serviceman.
Okay.
You know what I mean? When I was born up, I was in cadets. I'd done everything from the cadets to the TA to everything. The point is, I feel disgraceful of the way that they treat the people of this country.
Do you know, I think there's something, once you become a politician, I think you must have to, I don't know, have a chip put in your brain or something where you forget